episode 5, #CancelConor. Let's begin. Bob.
Yes.
Mr. Lindsay.
Yes.
Cousin Bob, I guess, because we're the way our family works.
I married your mom's cousin, Evel.
Yeah. So you're old enough to be uncle, but we're not close enough related to be uncle-nephew kind of thing. We're technically cousins, I guess.
I guess technically cousins, but
Yeah.
it is more of a nephew-uncle kind of thing
Yeah,
because of our ages. Eh?
Yeah, because we always called you Evel and you Bob, but it's like they're older than us. It doesn't feel right.
Well, now you're old, so it's okay.
Yeah, now we're kind of leveled out again, right? So
Yeah, that's right.
Be family member related through marriage once removed.
yeah, and it always takes so much jargon to say. It's like, well, he's a cousin, but he's my mom's age, or that's how they work out, sort of thing. I always fall apart on the removed and where it actually sits kind of thing. But
You need a chart to figure that out, right?
yeah, well, and that's, I think, where Ancestry.com comes in, where it kind of gives you some help with some of that stuff. But
That's right.
yeah, family tree looks like a tangled bush a lot of the time. So yeah.
True.
Why don't you start by telling a little bit of your history and what it is that you did? Because you're used to be a history professor,
Sort of, yeah.
sort of thing. So
I was born and raised here in Saskatoon, and I studied history at the university here and taught for a small college there, Gabriel Dumont College, which is a Métis teacher education program that I taught in. I met Evel, my wife, when we were working for lawyers downtown in our 20s, and that's how I met your mom and all that kind of stuff. I am the grandson and great-grandson of pioneers who came here to farm, originally from Scotland on both sides, very, very Scottish, and like most Canadian boys, I wanted to be in the NHL when I grew up, but that didn't work out. It takes talent and other things.
yeah,
But I always enjoyed reading, and so I followed history, and I had a wonderful career at the University of Saskatchewan, particularly in Gabriel Dumont College. And when I wasn't teaching there, I was out at your ranch having fun in the summers.
yeah, I suppose, eh? That's
Your mom and dad threw the great parties, the family reunions.
yeah, that's kind of what we're somewhat known for, anyways. Is
Yeah.
everybody going home with an armful of potato salad. So
Yeah, I ducked that one.
yeah, Zach tried to. He couldn't get away from it though.
Oh,
So
you got stuck it?
yeah.
I got to teach the boy to be quicker.
Yeah. Okay, see you. Bye.
Yeah. No, that's basically who I am. Is I'm a son, a grandson, a cousin, an uncle, a father, a spouse. You know, the usual. And I've had a good life, but we always have our obstacles. We were talking about that earlier and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I'm particularly happy that I married well, and that we have a wonderful son. And I'm retired now, so I don't give a shit.
Yeah. Yeah. When your focus in history is mostly Métis studies, I'm guessing, or Western Canada kind of thing, or is it kind of all of Canada?
Well, I started off. I have a specialty in my undergraduate degree. My BA was mostly European diplomacy. My mentor was an Estonian German historian. And then for my master's degree, I studied Tommy Douglas, CCF government and unions. So I did a bunch of labor history. But when I came to teach at the university, the opening was in Indigenous Studies. And so I had to work up that field. And then that was 1990 or so. And then in 1998, I was hired by the Métis to teach in the Gabriel Dumont College. And that was a wonderful experience.
Nice.
Mm.
Nice. And that's, Gabriel Dumont is one of he was the secondary leader basically of the whole Riel Rebellion, and if anybody knows some of Saskatchewan's history anyways.
That's true.
So
he was the fighter. That's why they named the college here after Gabriel Dumont, because they were, the Métis were and still are fighting for their rights and their,
slide that just a little bit closer.
get it closer.
I think
it's a very interesting history, the history of resistance, because it's a minority of, my wife and her family are Métis, and you guys are Métis, and so
which we don't talk about for some reason.
Well, no, with all the discrimination and stuff, I think a lot of the people who denied or hide their Métis history is because they could pass as white, and so their kids never got beat up on the school ground, and they got jobs because for a long time, if you were a Métis or an Indian, nobody would hire you, and so the rule was sort of last hired, first fired, and so if you could pass, then you passed, and that way you could get employment, and your kids are safe, and all that kind of stuff. It's when you get older that you really want to know what your identity is, and that's where people come back to do genealogy and figure out what their Métis history is. And there's a lot to be proud of in Métis history, because it's not just resistance movements or rebellions or things like that. The Métis helped to create this country.
Yeah.
I would say even more so in some ways, at least, than First Nations did, in terms of the relationships between newcomers and people who lived here. So.
Yeah, well, if I remember any of my history correctly, it was a big part of the French that originally showed up to find the New World or whatever, and the Métis are a result of that, because the French and the natives really found an equilibrium, and they were happy with living with each other. They weren't particularly forceful in each other's ways, and they found a good balance and a good alliance with each other. But when the English showed up, they're like, oh, they've got it kind of settled, let's just go take it over now.
The English had a sort of an arm's length relationship with the First Nations people.
Yeah.
They had to marry. That was an indigenous diplomatic custom. But the French lived with indigenous peoples, whereas the English didn't want to live with them. And so that's the real big difference of how the relationship subsequently developed. And where we're at today, because indigenous people are still kept at a distance from the rest of society, from English society.
Yeah.
Today, but because what I guess I'm agreeing with you, saying that the French and the First Nations did reach this accommodation where they lived and had children together, and an economic relationship that was beneficial to both sides, and it developed from there.
Yeah. When I wondered about that too, with a lot of the tensions that are going on. I mean, again, now because there's a new wound that's been opened up, but the idea that, again, people are trying to run from the truth, run from history, sort of thing like that. And I've been told my whole life that I was white. And whatever. It doesn't really matter that much.
You tan really well in the summer, though.
But I have a really good tan. I mean, my grandma has the best tan I've seen at anybody in January. So
that's a permanent tan.
Yeah, and there was just certain things. Well, especially when I had long hair, and I had a good tan, and it's like, are you sure somebody didn't lie to you? But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much. But I mean, I come from just the edge of that level where racism was still kind of pushed around for everything, and it's better to mind your P's and Q's, sort of thing like that, and just pretend white to be white, sort of thing like that. Not that it was ever told to us that way, but then you get older, and within the last decade or two, where all this talk of being who you are, and things like Ancestry.com or 23andMe, where you can actually genetically find out who you are, sort of thing. And it's kind of interesting, because I've actually been thinking about getting it done, just to see how much of it that is there, or what other parts there actually are there, and stuff like that. But the other part is that it's not so much I don't have to feel bad about wanting to make jokes or something for some of it, but at the same time, I mean, you hear about all this cultural appropriation kind of stuff too, and it's like, come on, guys, like, you can't wear a feather on your head at Halloween and pretend to be a native person, because that's somehow stealing something from somebody.
Well, I think I'm not certain about the costume kind of things, but mascots and stuff, it's kind of insulting, I think, to indigenous people. They're not allowed to really be who they are, or to be part of sort of the development of a relationship with sports teams, but they are appropriated in that sense, that the Cherokee vehicles, you got the Comanche airplanes, you got the used to be what was it, the land of the, I was thinking of the butter. They used to sell butter in the States, and they used an Indian. Prudential Insurance, I think it was, had an Indian on a rock looking very stoic and stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a sense of the appropriation was virility, that the men were virile and warriors and all this kind of stuff, when in fact they may have been that, but they were far more complex. So they've been, I think the resistance to these mascots and the cultural appropriation is that it's perpetuating stereotypes that originated way back 100, 200 years ago, and not allowing people to be who you are. Like Native peoples are respected as Native peoples if they're dead.
Yeah.
So Sitting Bull or Pound Maker, whoever, they're dead now, so you can say, oh, yeah, they're nice. But if you meet an Indian person on the street, you can be mean to them.
Yeah. Well, and that's even saying it that way is something that I had to be corrected even when I was in high school still. It's like, Indians are from India.
Yeah,
these are
right.
natives. Yeah. And so but there's certain people, like I come home to visit people, and I mean, yeah, you say it, friends of mine still say Indians and stuff like that, and I know exactly what they mean. Yeah. But it's like, when I say, it's like, oh, we went for Indian food or something like that, and like, what do you mean, like pemmican and bannock and stuff? No, like actual Indians. Like
exactly. Well, when I was teaching, I remember this one woman came to me after a class, and she said, Bobby, you use Indian, Aboriginal, Indigenous, Native in your lectures. And she says, and that's all fine, she says, but if you ever talk about me, I'm an Indian. That's what I knew. She was a little older than me at the time, because that's what she grew up with, right?
Yeah.
So now there's a new generation growing up with Indigenous. When I was teaching, it was Aboriginal, and in fact, that's the word used in the Constitution. The Aboriginal rights are in the Constitution, not Indigenous rights. Indigenous is the contemporary politically correct word.
Yeah.
But it changes over generations. And, if you insult somebody unwittingly by saying you're Indian, well, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I always remember that one of my students who said, well, any of those terms apply, but this is what applies to me. So.
Yeah, the fact that line keeps moving is the other thing. And it's, most of us are fine with it too. It's like, well, sure, but you got to give us, a week to kind of remember what we're saying sometimes, because this is a brand new thing to us. Don't attack me instantly because there's a new term today, kind of thing. And the one thing is, like, you were giving a lot of examples of mostly American sporting stuff like that. Everybody usually glazes right over Eskimos.
Yeah.
Edmonton Eskimos. I mean, that's a sports team, and
that's right.
People have talked about that. And I've seen people from way up north somewhere talking about, it's like, well, yeah, and we're not actually Eskimos. I mean, that's, again, kind of the whole, labeling of what we're, like, we're Iqaluit, and I'm sure I'm saying that wrong too, but, we're this tribe, or we want to be referred to as these peoples. With that said, though, Edmonton Eskimos is my team, so that's the one I root for. So
now they're the Elks, though, so it's going to be harder to cheer, I would say. But these are outsider terms, right? So that Eskimo was a Cree term. So the fur traders came along with the Cree, the Nahia people, and the Cree people took them as far north as they could go until they ran into other peoples. And when they ran into the Inuit, the fur trader said, well, who are these people? And the translation was Eskimos.
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah. And so it was eaters of raw meat kind of thing. And there was another one, I can't remember the term, it was pointed skins and things like this. So they're all outside of terms depending on the European person or Caucasian person, whoever, who was with a certain indigenous group at the time they met a different one. And so the names get adopted. And they're all outside names because the Ojibwe.
Yeah.
They're Anishinaabe. There's various versions of Anishinaabe. So Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, different ways to say it. That's how they know themselves, whereas we know them maybe as Ojibwe. In the States, or Ojibwe, in the States they're Chippewa.
Oh, okay.
Because that's what the Americans heard when they were fur trading and stuff like that. So I think that's part of the root of the problem of this. The Native peoples are just sick and tired of being misidentified.
Yeah.
And then their culture is appropriate. Those parts of their culture that are artifacts from the old days, like the equestrian bit and the warrior bit and all this kind of stuff. It's taken by the people who want an identity and don't know what their own is, and so they'd rather play at being an Indian or an Indigenous person than to research their own identity, figure out who they are.
Well, and talk about appropriation. I mean, the equestrian part is also fairly new because there was no horses in North America until 500 years ago when the conquistadors brought them.
Yeah, the Spanish reintroduced them. There was an indigenous horse way back, but they were pedestrian. You're right; it was very pedestrian.
Yeah.
So if you go to Wanaskewin, and if you look at the sculptures there, they have with the buffalo run, they have people sort of waving blankets and things like that. So that's how they funneled them into the corrals or over the cliffs, the jumps.
Yeah.
And it wasn't chasing them. Well, somebody started making noises and shooting at them, and they just stampede. But then every once in a while, somebody would pop up, and they'd keep them in the funnel.
Yeah.
Later on, then you could do it a different way, but with horses and that. But originally, it was very pedestrian.
Yeah, one a very big team effort.
Yeah,
Boy, like running a herd of buffalo off a cliff, like that's a big deal because I mean self-preservation is a big thing, but you also know that you're in a herd and stampeding. I mean, as the animal, like we're running from something. Where do we go?
Yeah.
So
north of your mom and dad's place, there's a big Métis buffalo jump there.
Yeah.
But to cross the river, I'm not exactly sure whether it's north or south of the old buffalo jump. There's the Gardapi crossing. So you've got Gabriel de Mont's crossing, which is now a bridge, right? Gabriel's crossing.
Yeah, that's actually right by mom and dad's place.
It is, yeah. And but the Gardapis had their own crossing as well, north of Batoche somewhere. I don't know exactly where.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds right because there's a ton of Gardapis that live in Duck Lake, but it's the same chunk of river that kind of flows right through that whole part of the province, sort of thing, too, right? So, I can imagine it wouldn't be that much further down. And I mean, Batoche is only 10 kilometers or so, I think, from mom and dad's farm, even.
Yeah.
So it would. And I remember growing up and going there a handful of times, kind of learning some of the history, and then not realizing that our family was actually directly a part of it, even.
Oh yeah,
because
you
apparently,
were resisting. Yeah.
Apparently they were horse thieves. They were stealing horses from American soldiers and bringing them up through Saskatchewan and then selling them to other platoons of soldiers. Apparently,
that's an age-old practice.
Yeah, yeah. Which I mean, good job.
It takes organization, skill, stealth, ability, and courage above all. Because they used to raid each other's encampments to try to get the horses and that. And it takes a lot of skill. It was the young people who were doing it mostly, 16, 17 years old, because they wanted to get a reputation. Because they had to earn their spot around the campfire to the council fire. I mean, how do you do it? Well, in warfare. Well, if there's no war, then just go steal a few horses and show your military ability.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's how Louis Riel and Gabriel Dumont actually got more horses for their cause. It's because they knew the Gardapi, Garapi families, sort of thing like that, and they're like, well, these guys got some of the best horses from soldiers, so they can hook you up.
See, when you start investigating your own history, you run across all this stuff. Some of it comes down through the family, and some of it's been recorded over time that you can add to your story. Mm-hmm. But if you don't look, you'll never know. Yeah,
well, it's kind of interesting that I grew up someplace that was really close to my family's history, and I didn't realize like how close we were tied to a lot of it. Because
you're even closer than you think. Because just down the road was the original camp. It wasn't Batoche, because they're buffalo hunters, right?
Yeah.
So you're on this side. So you're at what's the name of that little place down past your farm there?
Petiteville.
Yeah, Petiteville. Yeah.
That was the main ferry crossing or river crossing or whatever.
Yeah. And it was perfect for a bunch of buffalo hunters. But as soon as the buffalo start to disappear and stuff, the Métis at Red River are always farming plus buffalo hunting plus maybe working for the fur companies and stuff like that. And so in the 1870s, around where your family lives, the buffalo declined, so you've got a farm. Well, the soil at your parents' ranch there is really ranch soil, sandy. It's not good
It's
for
shit.
agriculture. Yeah. So the Métis moved across the river,
Yeah.
where it's really good soil, so they could farm.
Yeah.
And Bell's family, before they could really get established on the banks of the South Saskatchewan here, the government came and used encouraged fraud to dispossess the Métis. When the Métis resisted, then they sent the army. So.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, and they weren't thought of as people. I mean, that's why a lot of that stuff had been turned into a battle. A lot of at the start, where apparently Batoche has actually changed that some the videos and some of the history to soften the blow of what happened. It's like, well, no, you thought you were superior to them, and you didn't think of them as people. That's part of the reason why they could slaughter these savages, sort of thing like that, without mercy.
Yeah. But
at the same time, though, too, it was the thing to do in those days, and it's
the attitude, right?
Yeah, and it's shitty because it's so fresh. It's a fresh wound that's still being reopened a lot of times with things that happened, but we can't really look at it with today's eyes and expect to see the same story or understand history if all we can do is see, well, I wouldn't have done that. Well, there's lots of people that wouldn't have done that now.
Yeah, well,
but
as an historian, I say, well, the issue for a person like myself as an historian is not to necessarily judge people by our standards. I mean, there are some things that are right and wrong that cross the ages, but to try to understand what people were facing at the time.
Yeah.
So, and that helps you understand their actions, because we think they have all these choices, when really they only had a narrow field of choices. And so then they had to choose, well, which way is the best way? Should we just roll over and let them take our land, or should we stand up and fight for it? And remember, that was the second time they're being dispossessed. They already dispossessed Red River.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, and that was, where we're sitting now was still considered Ruperts Land 150 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it was some, and again, Rupert obviously is a British name.
Rupert was the king's cousin.
Yeah, so it was a chunk of the colonies that was supposedly owned by the English, but it's like it clearly wasn't settled then, because they were still. It was still in progress, shall we say?
If you look at the maps of the day, what they know about is the rivers, right?
Yeah.
And maybe 100 yards outside the rivers, and so that's what was settled. Not even settled, but that was what had been explored.
Yeah.
And it was always news to First Nations and to Inuit and other people who the government told, we own the land. They go, well, where did you get title for the land?
Yeah.
Well, we didn't give it to you. So it's this assumption, and we still have these assumptions that we were talking earlier about the racism. The same attitude that says, let's kill them, is with us today, which is, let's ignore them, right? And in other words, so right now, all these children's graves are being found, right? And the government and the churches, or the Catholic Church, I should say, are resisting it. And there's a huge chunk of the Canadian population who resist accepting what has happened. Whereas Native peoples knew it for generations. This knowledge of brother or sister never came home. This has been passed down for generations. Yeah. But it's the same attitude that they are...
Don't be shy, Val, if you need to go.
Oh, I was just walking from the camera.
No, that's fine.
the same attitude that said, well, let's just take it over, let's dispossess them, let's defraud them or shoot them, whatever it is. The racism behind that is still with us today.
Yeah.
Right. And I used the example of the denial, but it's worse than that. It's racism in hiring still, racism in the hospitals.
Yeah.
You see that came out a lot before they found the babies here in their graves. Walking down the street, Indians going to a store. Who's following them? The store dick doesn't follow me.
No.
Because I'm glowing white. They follow brown people. And not necessarily the Filipinos or other people, but Indians, First Nations peoples. And, and these are attitudes that are so ingrained in us that it's unconscious in many cases.
Yeah.
That you see an Indian and your knees jerk up and, they're again thought of as lesser than you.
Yeah, and that's the whole systemic racism that keeps popping up, that people want to try to address. And yeah, when something like 215 bodies were identified, and it's like, okay, well, even on that, let's take that apart. Like, why was it 215? Not to say that the number has any significance, but think about how long it takes to find the first one, and then keep digging and then identify that many. Why did that story break when it did? Shouldn't it have been a story the instant somebody was found?
Well, it was suppressed to begin with. In other words,
right?
It's like the residential schools, right, where these children were victims of. The abuse that went on there, the churches knew about it, and in many cases the government knew about it as well. What the churches did was they just transferred the guy.
Yeah.
And then they just denied it. They just denied. The Catholic Church denies it right today.
Yeah.
They won't give up their files when they should give the files, at least so the families can bury the dead,
Mm-hmm.
and rebury them and bring them home, as they say. It's that same attitude. We know what's good for you. We're superior to you.
Yeah.
Don't rock the boat. Our white boat. Don't rock it.
Yeah. Well, and the other, good and bad thing about it is that there is something like social media that helps people understand. And as soon as that story broke, everybody knew about it.
Yeah.
But even today, now it's August, who's talking about it still?
Yeah. The attitude there, I think, I've heard about it a lot at the university over the years from students, is the white students say, just get over it. Well, they can say that because they've never really dealt with anything, other than Dad grounded them for 30 days or wouldn't let them take the car, right? Whereas we're talking about people's lives here, and they say just get over it. Well, it's not easy to get over it. We had a video that young Indigenous people made about some young girls young women in Pineview, the provincial corrections in Prince Albert. And they had addictions, and they were prostituting themselves and stuff like this, and they raised it, saying, just get over it, Paul. They said, you get addicted to a drug, and then, have to feed yourself and your family somehow, and, is it going to be any different for you than us? Just get over it? Yeah. Easy for you to say, it's really hard to do. And it's that attitude of superiority. But to me, it's an attitude of denial.
Absolutely, yeah.
You have a problem? Well, it's not my problem, so just get over it.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole idea of addiction and the other, family and problems and stuff like that, the whole idea of get over it. It's like, well, when your sense of family is destroyed right from the get-go, and you're born into that, and you don't know what an actual family is supposed to be, and then because of the color of your skin, everybody else is shitting on you at the same time. It's like, well, I'm pushing this stone uphill forever. Like I'm doing the whole Sisyphus thing, right? Where I'm basically like doomed to live a shit life because I was born to some family. Like nobody has a choice of that.
Yeah.
And it's good that there is an understanding of there needs to be some sort of recompense leveled to people. But people getting online and bitching at the Catholic Church, the government, and expecting something's going to happen. Like let's be a little bit more tactful,
a little more realistic. The government actually acts as a bad parent, rather than really helping Indigenous peoples by listening to their elders or listening to the people who say this is what we should do. The government throws money at them and says, just go away. That's what I mean by the bad parent.
Yeah.
When the issue of the schools first came out, they said, well, government said, set up a healing foundation and stuff like this. Well, gee, a person who living a difficult life, maybe you should spend more time with them than the few months it took to negotiate a payout of money. Yeah. They need something long term. And, people say, okay, well, maybe they do, but they're not willing to, non-Native people are not willing to actually do something about it, to help the individuals and the communities heal. You raise a really interesting point about the families, and you steal the children for 100 years, and so they never see mom and dad, right? In terms of every day, we saw mom and dad every day, and so you absorb as a child parenting skills, right? And even if you grow up later and say, well, I reject some of the parenting skills, or get the belt on the ass or whatever, so I'm not going to do that. You still had a model. the kids who were in these schools for 10, 12 years, 8, 10, 12 years, didn't have a model. They had the priest or the minister or the nun at the front of the class. And their response at that time, the school's a little different now, but the response at that time is that, if you were talking or giggling or whatever, that you got the strap.
Yeah.
Or you got, they did all sorts of evil things to the children to get them to stop speaking their language and stuff. But just the idea that the violence towards children was not a traditional part of Indigenous culture. Quite the opposite.
Yeah.
And I would say it was introduced by the churches and the state-run schools who used violence to solve a conflict between the teacher and the student.
Yeah.
So then they go home, they don't have any model for how to be a parent. And so anytime there's an issue between the spouses or with the children, violence is the answer. You slap them around, punch them in the face. That was not the way they were taught. But they weren't taught by their parents anymore. In fact, it was the grandparents who taught the children.
Yeah.
Because mom and dad are really busy doing other things, right? Trying to survive.
Well, and not only that, I mean, that's, again, one of those things that has no need for racial distinction, because it's the Catholics that are doing this. But when it's white people that are Catholic doing it to other white people, it's like, oh, well, they just have some family issues or whatever sort of thing, and it's just, again, swept under the rug because, they'll just go to church and say a couple of Hail Marys and everything will be fine. But they're white, so they get a pass anyways.
They do. Oh, yeah.
But it's like Native people are learned and taught to be shitty, aggressive people. And it's like, well, yeah. Of course you're going to have problems with them, especially because you're already talking about them as the other. They're already beneath you. And then it's like, see how violent they are? See how drunk they are? Or whatever? Like, well, you pushed all of that on them.
Yeah. And people who have no personal knowledge of Indigenous peoples are the first to judge.
Yeah.
Right? Because they've heard the stereotypes, and they've seen it. It's the stereotypes or the racism is taught at home first, because the children don't see each other. You look at little kids playing, a Native kid and a white kid and an Asian kid and a black kid. They're playing.
Yeah.
As one Alma Katwe had said, a Cree elder, she says, the children see each other's spark. They see the fire inside each other, and they don't see the difference. That's taught. The difference is taught.
Yeah.
So when they're little kids, they just love each other and they're having fun and stuff. And if there's conflict, that's ignored or forgotten in a few minutes, right? It's taught at home. Then it's taught in the schools, or at least reinforced in the schools.
Yeah.
Because the expectation of the white teacher at the front of a Métis or an Indian kid is that they're lesser beings, right?
Yeah.
And they're the first, if there's any issue in the classroom, they're the first to suffer the consequences, not little Mary or little Johnny, the white kids from the suburbs.
Yeah.
And that goes all the way up to the university level. I've seen it up there and I've heard it up there to the university level. So if this is what's happening through the schools and all the way up to university level, then if you look at the politicians, it's no wonder that they are resistant to doing anything for Native peoples. And when they want to do something, they're the bad parent. And they throw money.
Yeah.
And that money helps because you have to pay people to help you through therapy or whatever it is. But it's not the be-all and end-all. It's to create the resources within the community to help themselves.
Yeah.
People used to ask me, non-Native people used to ask me, so how can we help those of us who are compassionate? And I said, well, the first thing to do is get out of the way.
Yeah.
Right? Because let people make their own decisions. And if you let Native peoples make their own decisions, in many cases they make really good decisions. Now, Darcy Bear at the Whitecap took a place that was 90% unemployment, a reserve, 90% unemployment, a crazy amount of addiction and stuff like that. All of a sudden people are employed. They got their a Canadian PGA golf course. And
Holy smokes.
Yeah, and they got the big casino. It was supposed to go downtown here, but racism drove it out of town.
Of course.
And so they bring in all these acts to play music and stuff. And they just built a hotel and stuff. They were allowed to make their own decisions, and when they made their own decisions, they made some really good decisions. Now, I'm not saying that now they're perfect. There's no addictions on their reserve or anything like that.
Yeah.
Far from it. But they're in a position now because they're earning their own money that they can take that money and say, "This is what we're going to do with it. We're going to provide better education for our children, or we're going to create employment." If you go to down the street here to Petro-Canada. And you gas your car, there's two people working at Petro-Canada. Usually you don't see one, but there's usually two people working at Petro-Canada. You go to Creeway, out in the on the Indian Reserve, or the Urban Reserve, I should say, there's about 8-9 people working.
Yeah.
And the Indigenous leaders would say, well, it's better for people to have a job than to be on welfare. So we'll forego the profits that you would expect as a white person to employ our people, because the employment, you're doing something, it gives them self-worth. It gives them a little money so the kid can go, the boy can be put into hockey, the girl can be put in ballet, or whatever. They can own a home, buy a car. Things that non-Native people take for granted are denied because of poverty or other reasons to Native peoples. And so, people complain that, well, they spend so much money on Native peoples. Well, very little of that money gets to Native people. It goes through the Indian Affairs and all the salaries and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But when Native people can create a business, and there's lots of Native businesses across the country and in this province, that's their own money. So Indian Affairs can't tell them what to do with it.
Yeah.
They mostly, all the cases I know, they reinvest that money in their community, first with employment, and then for education and things like that.
Yeah, but
that's
like
what I mean
any,
by getting out of the way. Sorry.
yeah, I mean, like by like any standard of hierarchy though too. Like as soon as you have some level of the haves and the have-nots, there's going to be some level of corruption.
Yeah.
So we're bringing them into a society or a power structure that they're not used to.
Mm-hmm.
So they're also trying to understand, like the rest of us, that I want to stay on top, or I want to have some level of control, that means I'm going to have to sell my soul to some degree, because it's like I need to stay in power, and it's not just me that's in power, it's the handful of people that I need to keep happy that'll keep me in power.
It's the ins and outs. It's the band council system is an alien system to traditional Indigenous leadership.
Yeah.
And that's the band council system is based on the municipal model. So it's the ins and the outs.
Mm-hmm.
And so this family's in, and so everything flows through them, and then the other family gets in, that kind of stuff. The examples I'm talking about is that people got sick and tired of that.
Yeah.
And they said, what we're going to do is we're going to create a firewall. So all you people who are elected or selected, all your leaders, you can set the agenda. Yes, we want an urban reserve, we're going to put a gas station on it or whatever, convenience store. But you're not going to run the store, because that's when politicians get sticky fingers.
Oh, okay.
So they created a firewall. And that's what Bear did. He said, okay, we want an economic development on our reserve, and so we'll set the agenda and we'll put it in motion, but we're not running it. We'll hire people to run it. Even if we hire our own people, they send them to school to get a BCom and bring them back, and they can be a manager. But the firewall is there because in the first place they learned all the corruption you talked about.
Yeah.
Was taught to them by non-Native society, and they got sick of that.
Yeah.
Because that just enriched the family, didn't enrich the reserve or the people. So they put the firewall in and say, which is what successful non-Native peoples do as well, right? That like Justin Trudeau, whether you love him or hate him, Justin Trudeau does not run the business. He doesn't run Air Canada. Doesn't run CBC.
Well, he doesn't run Canada necessarily either.
Well, no, it's a collective effort.
Yeah,
and
it's him
they
and a
manage
group.
it.
Yeah.
They manage it.
Yeah.
They manage the economy. That's their role. Same with Mo and Regina. They manage the economy, right?
Yeah.
That's their role. Some are better managers than others, and so sometimes the economy is better. But without that firewall, then Mo and Kenny next door and Trudeau in Ottawa, with their sticky fingers, would be, sticking in their back pockets.
Yeah.
So Native peoples learned that lesson and said, no, we're not going to do it. And so all the successful businesses, Native businesses you see, I'll guarantee that there's a firewall between the people who said, let's do it, and the people who are doing it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes way better sense, because, hierarchies don't really work for actual equality, for one.
No.
it's a pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
And everybody tries to say it's like, well, Amway's a pyramid scheme, or this other company's a pyramid. They're all pyramid schemes. Don't kid yourself.
That's true.
Amazon is. Jeff Bezos is how many billions of dollars in? I think he's out of it now, but still, one person at the top.
Out of it. He doesn't have to run it day to day,
Yeah.
But it's his business, so he gets all the money.
Yeah. But similar idea. It's some level of conglomerate at the top that the handful of small, individuals, sort of thing like that, are controlling millions of people. And it's no different when it comes to the reserves and stuff like that, where they were saying, it's like, well, let's talk to one of your band members, and then they can make all the decisions. And they said no. That's what you're saying, right? Is that it's like, no, that's not how this is going to run.
You talk about a hierarchy. Native cultures traditionally were egalitarian, so they were kind of horizontal, right? So when you went to war, you followed the war chief, the best warrior. When you're going to trade, you went with the best trader. He was the leader. And the best hunter, he was the leader. But that's all sensitive to the context. Yeah. So the war chief didn't run a society, so to speak, when there wasn't a war.
Yeah.
And the hunter didn't have much to say when there wasn't a hunt. But the leaders over time often combined these roles. Big Bear was a perfect example. He was a spiritual leader. He was a leader of the hunt. He was a warrior, a diplomat, like a negotiator, all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And but when there was no call for him to be the leader, he wasn't messing around trying to lead. Whereas we're non-native people that go, one leader, you got to lead, even if he has a cabinet and stuff. It's just this idea that you're always in power, you guys. You make all the decisions.
Yeah.
Whereas native people say, no, he makes the decision on the hunt, he makes the decision on war, he makes the decision on peace. And by saying that, I don't mean that the others don't have a say. They all have a say, right? And those leaders will do their best to accommodate all those different points of view.
Yeah, like an actual democracy and an egalitarian way where it actually worked a lot of the time. And and to backtrack a little bit too, I mean, because we talked about native families and stuff not having violence. I mean, to your point, there was a war leader. I mean, natives fought amongst each other and other tribes and stuff like that too. So it's not like they were the other part too, where we're not looking at them as they were some sort of peaceful one with nature, never did anything violent or whatever. Like, that's not true. Yeah. Like the reality of it is they also had to live in and they rubbed shoulders with all kinds of peoples that they didn't agree with sometimes.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's all kinds of stories. Well, I know the train bridge in Lethbridge, and it's a big, beautiful wrought iron structure. But there's a plaque that's underneath it that talks about the Blackfoot and the Cree people having a massive battle there. And it was a full-out massacre because the Cree tried to, like, it was 1,000 or so Cree that tried to attack like 200 Blackfoot, and they lost.
Well, it ended up being more than 200 Blackfoot in the end because the word went out. The story I was told was that it was actually the Blackfoot women who saw the Cree, and they set the alarm off, right?
Yeah.
And that brought all the Blackfoot people together to fight against the Cree. The Cree were hoping for the element of surprise because they had more warriors and they had better guns and all this kind of stuff. And it was a nice plan, but it didn't work. You ran into Kukum and she raised the alarm. And so that was about 1870. And the Cree had their butts kicked. Yeah. But to put that in a wider context, the Cree and the Blackfoot, they fought over the years every once in a while, but they traded a lot with each other as well. There were some intermarriages. Crowfoot adopted Poundmaker as his son, for example, earlier than the period I'm talking about. And so, it's sort of like we went to war against Germany twice in the 20th century. Yeah. But, we're trading partners today, and, there's been lots of intermarriage, sort of a similar thing. The difference with Native peoples is that the numbers of death or numbers of people who were casualties in the war are a lot smaller. Because they tend to be smaller battles in terms of numbers. Yeah. But it's the same, similar thing.
Yeah, well, their societies were too about it. It's like, well, if we're going to fight about something, it better be important. Where, again, like the whole idea of the hierarchy where some king wants something and he's basically throwing a temper tantrum like a child. I want those toys. I need those resources. And then they send off a bunch of people and they stay in their own country or way behind their high walls and stuff like that. And how did we do? We won? Did we win? Like
a lot of truces because there was a bloody stalemate, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, and it's well, I mean, history in general is a bloodbath. Like that's kind of how.
True, yeah.
And we've been, well, Steven Pinker talks about how we've done terrible things in history, but this day and age is the best time to be alive because we have better medical technology. We have fewer full-on wars. Like, well, there is no real wars that are fought between countries and stuff anymore. A lot of the main ones that happen now are civil skirmishes and stuff. And
Similar wars, that's right.
I mean, not to say that America doesn't fight everybody for whatever reason, but it's partly for them to stay on top.
Yeah, they don't want to pick a fight with China or Russia because they're kind of equals in terms of power.
Yeah.
So they can kick around little people. They're being bullies, essentially. You know?
Yeah, well, that's the idea of war, is that either side has a chance of winning. It's where if they kind of fund all sides of all wars in the Middle East, it's like, well, this is something I can take care of and profit at the same time.
A lot of the military support that's given to Middle Eastern countries is used to suppress their own people.
Yeah.
So when the Arab countries ganged up on Israel a couple of times, Israel kicked their butts. And so, they've tended to stay away from the Palestinian issue, for example, because they don't want to get caught up into a conflict, because it's embarrassing to have your ass kicked by the people that you're always constantly saying are inferior to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and, well, the States will not go against Israel because, boy, oh boy, do they spend a lot of money together.
It's funny that it's a Judeo-Christian tradition, I guess, that it starts with the Jews, and then Christ comes along, and so there's an affinity, a religious affinity, I guess, between the Americans and others in Israel. Canada supports Israel pretty much and doesn't say a lot about some of the evil stuff that's going on in Palestine, for example. Or in the West Bank, stealing East Jerusalem, evicting Arabs from their homes that they've had for centuries because some Jews wanted it. Because they want to get rid of them. Well, you can't. I mean, the Germans tried that to get rid of all the Jews, and you think the Jews of all peoples would have learned that lesson, that no, you can't and shouldn't.
Yeah.
But they're doing it because there's that right wing thing. There's an Israeli couple when we went to Egypt, and I sort of asked him about the question. He said, well, about America. I said, America's a significant part of America is anti-Semitic, hates Jews, but on the other hand, they love Israel. And he says, yeah, it's a bit of a conundrum, but he says, the Jews are important to the biblical reckoning at the end of history.
Yeah.
Right? So all the Jews are going to be supposedly going to convert. And that's a signal that we're in the end of times, and stuff. So they hate Jews, but they need Jews to fulfill their prophecies. So it's really just
well, and they own crazy. Hollywood basically, right? So I mean, they seem to be doing well on making their voices heard and making their own profits, and
they're outgoing, gregarious people, and they're like black people, like Indians. The humor is really important because that's one way you can confront your reality without being constantly depressed.
Yeah.
I asked Tyrone Tatusis one day about it, and he says, well, we'd rather laugh than cry. If you look at it, there's a lot we could cry over, but that doesn't get us anywhere, and laughter at least helps us to live today.
Yeah, and isn't that the truth? I mean, comedy is kind of what levels a lot of these issues throughout the world, is that if it's something that we can't take a little time to joke about once in a while, and I understand there's some things that maybe it's a little too soon to joke about certain things, but I mean,
there's always that phrase, too soon.
Yeah, there is those things that happen, but I mean, at some point it's like, are we just going to sit here and be depressed about it forever, or are we going to try to again bring ourselves back together? Because when there's an issue, then there's some level of segregation, and we're going to be battling stuff together. It's like, let's get back together, have a joke, have a beer or whatever, and then move on with life, because like anything, the only way forward is together.
Yeah. When I first started teaching, there was still a remnant of the blame white society or blame the white man for our troubles amongst Indigenous students, right? But really quickly, within 5 or so years of me teaching, another generation comes up, and they stop that. They said, as long as we're pointing the finger at the white man for our problems, we're looking backwards.
Yeah.
And the young people said, we want to look forwards. So we're not playing that game anymore because it doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't mean that we're happy with what white people have done, and we understand it. So now we're going to fight it, I guess is the word I would use.
Yeah.
And so they've been trying to do it in a positive way.
Yeah.
And part of their sustenance of their culture, I think, is what you just mentioned, that, let's laugh at it and then move forward, and we'll get somewhere.
Yeah.
But pointing the finger is looking backwards.
Yeah, well, and that's the whole power of now sort of thing. Is are we gonna worry about something that we can't change? Are we gonna have anxiety about something that's gonna happen in the future, or are we just gonna be here now and living our current existence? Because
if you're angry, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future.
yeah,
So let's live now.
yeah, and I mean, yeah,
I learned that from my wife, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yvelle's a really present person.
yeah. I read a lot of Eckhart Tolle. I'm guessing then. Or?
Yes, I do. love
Yeah,
him.
yeah. So, yeah, and he's a great proponent of that idea because it's true. I mean, you can look at a clock and say, well, it's going to tick and tick, but it's like I got to wait for that thing to tick. But do I? Because right now is the only time I actually ever truly have.
Yeah.
5 minutes from now doesn't exist yet.
Yeah. It's at some point in your now, you have to be grateful for what you have.
Yeah.
Right. And then that gratitude comes back to you, I think, in the future, the next day of now.
Yeah. Well, and even with the whole idea of history of the pain and suffering that everybody deals with, and it's not like that's unique to anybody. We all have some level of strife in history. I mean, there was people that are still honestly dealing with issues that happened in the Second World War because people come back from a massive battle. They come back as changed people. They have issues that they don't know how to deal with. They take it out on their kids. Their kids get raised up in a pretty shitty, violent home. They don't know how to deal with stuff. They put it onto their kids, which is kind of my generation now almost. And it's like, well, am I still dealing with their issues that were happening just in that war? Never mind all the other stuff that's happened in between because people aren't. And that's just, a very direct line way of looking at things even. So never mind what the natives had to go through where the sense of family was corrupted right from the start from what they knew and understood. So it's like, how many generations of stuff are they still dealing with? Yeah. And it's good to see that there are the young people that are saying, okay, that is the past. It sucks. We can deal with that trauma though, but we can also move on from it because that's not right now. Even the most of the people that had that shit happen are all dead now.
Yeah. The white people say, just get over it.
Yeah.
But what I was told, like, mostly young men that I taught, young Indigenous men I taught, there's a couple I remember after class near the end of the term and stuff, they'd talk me out in the hall and they'd go, and it broke my heart the first time I heard it. They said, my parents never gave me a hug, never told me they loved me.
Oh, wow.
And, but remember the one guy said, but every day before I leave the house, I tell my kids I love them. Every day when I come back from school, I tell them I love them. I said, we're changing things, man.
Yeah.
Right? They're recreating the family. Right. And some people need more support than others. So there's, I don't know who does, but there's courses out there that life sort of courses where they teach you this is how you should really respond to things, and this is how proper behavior and things like that. And so that helps people who are not as capable maybe of some of my students who said we're just doing it, and that will help them. For the rest of society, we've talked a lot about Native peoples today, but as you said, non-Native peoples face crises and trauma and all sorts of things, not just in war, just in their lives as well.
Yeah.
And so how do we end those cycles? Native peoples are trying to end the cycles that they're stuck in. And so what about me, for example? What about the trauma I suffered in my life? Well, how do I get over that? Well, you got to be aware of it, and at a certain point, stop running from it and try to deal with it. As I mentioned earlier, one of the ways to start is just take a breath and say, what am I grateful for? Yeah. Every day I talk about I'm grateful for my life and my wife and our son and our home, our family, our friends, our wealth, our experiences, all these kind of things. Yeah. And that once I started doing that, which was late in my life, once I started doing that, it just had sort of a calming effect. That there are good things that I should be aware of. Yeah. So expressing gratitude keeps me aware that I have all these good things in my life. And so whatever else I'm trying to deal with, then it becomes easier.
Yeah, and express gratitude and feel it in a sense that it's a positive thing for me, not it's I have these things because other people don't, or it's not a comparison version of it. It's which I find too, because even putting it in that way, it's like, well, you're grateful that you don't have a shit life or you don't have this, that. It's like, well, you're still putting a negative spin on a certain level of it because it's like, I'm better than people now. Like, no, that's not gratuity in any direction either, right? Because you're starting now to put yourself in an others category. It's just like, no, just me here now. I've been lucky with this.
Yeah.
You know, and I even thought about that too with, well, being born with what I have just physically. It's like, that's pretty fortunate that I'm physically capable to have these kind of things, but it's like, also same thing. It's like, am I saying that because I'm physically better off than at least half of the population? Or am I just happy that I can do things and not compare myself to other people? It's like, no, I'm just happy that I'm capable of doing things, and that's more the way I should look at it, not because other people can't, but because I can, I want to help people that have ailments and stuff like that. When I do whatever level of teaching and helping, and it's its own form of healing, because it's like, well, let me give you some of my knowledge and energy, and let's like work together on this. And well, I don't know, I'm kind of tired today. It's like a great day to do it then, because once you work through it today, it'll be easier every time.
That's right.
And it's like, yes, like, let's do this. You know, and it's taken me a long time to get to that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Some people never get there.
Yeah.
And I'm not a religious person. I think religion has caused more bloodshed than any other single factor. But on the other hand, I understand that spirituality is really important to humans, including myself. And so while I've never gone to church, and Gladys even, she made me laugh. We were at the Anglican church one time, dedicating the windows. Well, one for Yvelle's mom, one for Ella, your grandmother.
Yeah.
And afterwards, we're heading out, and she comes up to me, Bob, I figured it out. I said, figured out what? She says, I figured out what church you belong to. I said, oh. She said, you belong to the round church. I said, round church? Yeah, you're always around it, never in it. That cracked me up. I've always remembered.
That's a good one.
Yeah, she got me that time. And it's true, but you mentioned Eckhart Tolle. You start reading other people, and even with the media today, YouTube, stuff that you're doing, you learn from other people. And so there's a book, I should lend it to you for you to read, by a psychiatrist. And it's not a heavy book. Brian Weiss, it's called Many Lives, Many Masters. And a friend gave it to me when I was going through a tough time. And basically he was Yale educated, so right at the top, right? Had a practice in Miami, really thriving. And one day this young woman comes in about 30, and she's got multiple issues, not just one issue, multiple issues. So he tries the standard stuff, it's not working. So she says to him, well, why don't you regress me back to my childhood? Maybe it was something when I was like 3 years old to deal with this one issue. Yeah. So he knows how to do that. He takes her back there, and then that doesn't really provide any answers. So she said, well, take me back to a past life. And he goes, well, But he looked up, there's literature on it. There's psychiatrists have done it. So he followed the rules because he's a scientist, right? And he took her back to another life. And I can't remember which one it was. It turns out she has 87 lives that she can recall under hypnosis. And but every once in a while, a master would come in between, and a different voice, and he'd go, who's that? And he was very skeptical. Yeah. But first time the master told him something about his son, and the girl could not have known about his son, who had passed on, was born with his heart reversed.
Okay.
And just a baby, right? Mm-hmm. And the master said, I know that about you, I know this about you. I go, okay, there's something going on here. I'm getting goosebumps just calling the story, right? So he's this scientist, but all of a sudden he's confronted with a different reality. Yeah. That's the spiritual reality that someone's talking to him from the beyond, right? Yeah. And he can't call upon them, but they just pop up once in a while to talk to him. And he helps her go through it took a couple of years, he helps her get through all her issues, but through past life regression. Yeah. And one of the things that, when he's talking to masters, that came up that stuck with me, he says, well, you come down here to deal with things, and the obstacles you face are things that you need to confront and deal with and overcome it for your spiritual development up there. Yeah. And so he says religions have it backwards. We think that we're human beings having a spiritual experience. No, we're spiritual beings having a human experience to help us with our spiritual development. Yeah. And as soon as he reversed it for me, then I lost all my hostility to the church. Well, not all the hostility, but I understood them. Yeah. I understood that they had it backwards. And so that makes sense to me. And it just made me it was a step in my own personal development to have to deal with whatever trauma and other things that are the baggage that I carry from my childhood. Right?
Yeah.
And stuff. It's a very good book.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of The Egg. It was one of the videos that Kurzgesagt in a nutshell does, and it's a little bit off brand for what it is that they do, but it's a really well told story of what reality could possibly be along kind of like a non-religious spiritual kind of way of looking, and it's kind of very similar to that line of thinking that this person dies in a car accident or whatever and meets the supposed God, and the guy says to God, it's like, well, is this the afterlife? It's like, well, kind of, and I'm not really God. But what you understand is time or reality isn't really true either. But so just so you get an idea, like I'm going to send you into your next life. So you're going to be a peasant woman in China in the year 544. And you're going to work in some rice fields and stuff. And it's like, what, are you sending me back in time? It's like, well, no. Well, like, how does this work? Like, where's everybody else? It's like, well, what do you mean? There is nobody else. This is your universe. And it's like, what's that? And it's like, well, you're going to live through all human experiences all the way through from the beginning to end of time. And then when you live all those experiences, you'll be ready to be born into my reality. And then you'll actually be, ready to be, hatch out of this egg sort of thing like that. And it's just like, whoa, hold on. And it was that whole idea where every person you see is you.
Yeah.
It's every good thing you do, every horrible thing that happens, it's all you doing this to yourself.
Yeah.
Every hug shared, every murder committed, whatever sort of thing like that. It's like, this is your lesson to learn, and you have to live all these lives to learn all these lessons, so you're ready to actually live. Yeah. And it's like, oh man, same thing. Yeah, kind of getting goosebumps thinking about it. It's just, yeah, I guess that would make kind of an interesting sense to say that, yeah, this is a spiritual existence, an energetic existence, which we're having the human version of it right now. And I mean, the idea to think the size of the cosmos, to think that this is all there is just our meat sacks living on this little mud ball.
No. That's part of that whole ego thing and the sense of superiority, that we're God's favorite creature. Mark Twain, famous author, right? Yeah. He wrote a book that he didn't want published in his lifetime. It was called Letters from Earth, and it was Satan who was banished to Earth, right?
Okay.
And writing back to the guy, says, well, what kind of place did you send me to? These people here think that they, the humans, are God's favorite creature. And he says, obviously it's the fly, because he made billions of them. And of course, that was 1900 or so he couldn't publish it, because that would have freaked everybody.
Oh yeah, terrified. You can't call
the question God, or let alone that we're the most important thing, right?
Yeah, or speak from Satan's perspective.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, that's the truth. But a lot of people, I don't know what I was going to say.
No, I like that idea though too, like the whole idea of having these big deities and stuff. There's a comedian, Bo Burnham, is awesome, and he's talking about being on stage and stuff, and it's like, I don't want to give people the sense, the idea that I think I know better or that I'm better than people, but anyways, here's a song from the perspective of God. And he goes on about that kind of stuff sort of thing too, and it's the whole idea that if you want to eat pork, you should go ahead, because eat whatever you want. Why would I draw the line at the deli aisle? I created the universe.
Oh yeah, I mean these rules, like don't eat pork. Well, if you let a pig run around your yard, he's going to eat everything.
Yeah.
So in the Middle East, they don't have a lot of everything on the ground because it's so dry. So you don't want that animal. So don't eat pork. Okay. Shellfish. Well, shellfish can kill people, right? Not just because of your allergic reaction, but just because sometimes they're lethal, depending on how their circumstances of their development.
Yeah.
And so don't eat shellfish because it'll kill you. Well, okay. These are simple things, but then they become, they develop a life of their own. Yeah. So here we are 2,000 years later, and people say, oh, don't eat pork, don't eat shellfish. Well, yeah, be careful with shellfish, and pork don't have trichinosis. But, generally speaking, it's like what you said about God. So I created the whole thing for you, and you're not going to eat the pig?
Yeah.
What's the matter with you?
Yeah, well, and that's, I mean, and things too, to not have a religious look at it. I mean, the whole idea of the narcissistic universe, you know, like it created life just to observe itself.
Well, that reminds me, I want to come back to your comment about creating the universe for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Well, we do create our reality, they say.
Yeah.
But it's usually in conjunction because we're not isolated, right?
Yeah.
But I remember Brenda Hansen, who she taught Jin Shin Jutsu. I shouldn't say taught; she practiced it. Just manipulating energy to heal people.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking this very issue.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, from what she has learned in her lifetime was that, well, at one point you were a rock. In another life you were a tree. And you experienced it. And if you're a rock, you're going to be there for a long time.
Yeah.
But that's how you learn what a rock is. Because Native people says, you know, everything has a spirit, right?
Yeah.
Rocks and trees and everything. And so you went through all that, and you were a dog, and you were a cat, and a bird, and all this kind of stuff. Now you're a human. And, you know, it's a little more, it seems to be trickier being a human because all these other, this is my take on it, all these other things are natural. When you come to be a human, you are natural, but society is so complex that you end up confused or in denial or whatever, and so you're not really living your life to the fullest.
You're not true to yourself.
Not true to yourself, thanks, Yvonne.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not true to yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas a dog is true to himself, a cat's true to themselves, and that kind of stuff. And so I said to her, I don't recall being a rock, but, you know, take your word for it. But I do, following the many lives, many masters, I believe that I've had different lives. I have phobias, right?
Yeah.
I freaked out when they went to teach us how to swim in grade 4. I freaked out, absolutely freaked out. And I didn't have any inkling that I was looking forward to this. I wanted to learn how to swim. I get in the water and I freak right out. Well, I meet Adele years later, and we're talking about her family. And she said, well, somebody fell off the boat on the way over, and so, you know, that woman was left a widow and all this kind of stuff. And I realized, that's probably me. Because I've had several people say that Adele and I have been around about 7 or 8 times together, right?
Yeah.
Or 8 or 9 times now together. And so that'd be one of them, right?
Yeah.
Certainly, another one would have been mining, because I have claustrophobia, not in the sense of I can get in a car or an airplane or stuff like that. Yeah. But if I'm physically kind of restricted in a
sorry, I didn't mean to hug you the other day.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It was in the open air.
Oh, okay.
But I react badly, and that's because I probably died in a cave as a miner, because that's another life that Adele and I lived and stuff like that. Because lots of miners in Adele's family in the olden days and stuff like that. Things like that now it makes sense to me of why I always freaked out about these things. And I had a dream one time. I was in prison, so I've been in prison, and I'm not going back. It was a French prison.
Oh, okay.
And it was in solitary. And the wind was high up, so I had to crawl up the window to get a fresher breath air, because I was living with my shit and piss in a bucket. Yeah, so I did something really bad. It reminded me of the Papillon, that movie Papillon, where they're on Devil's Island.
Yeah, I never saw that one, but
they don't really like you, so they put you. Steve McQueen, was it Steve McQueen? Dustin Hoffman, yeah. Anyways, those kind of things. Then I started realizing that this makes sense to me. It wasn't that I heard Adele tells me this, or we found out in the genealogy, and then I went, aha. But after a while, you go, this starts to resonate with me. That maybe that's how I make sense of it. Right? My modern phobias. And I haven't been regressed. I don't know if I want to be regressed, but I have been. But I just sort of accept it. So that's the other thing, that there's gratitude. Mm-hmm. So you give your gratitude, and you know, I learned that from Yvelle as well, and other people, but mostly my wife. Gratitude and acceptance. That's a hard thing for me, because I've always resisted it. Mm-hmm. Right? Resisted accepting, because I'm not happy. Wasn't happy with myself, or how I felt, or not every day, every minute, but just there's all those times where I'm not happy with who I am or what I'm doing and all this kind of stuff. Well, then I learned it's gratitude and acceptance. When you accept things, you're not resisting it. When you don't resist it, then you can move forward and stuff. So that's how I've moved further on my path once I started paying attention to my wife. Don't tell her that, but
yeah. Yeah, well, then the whole idea of a lot of things boil down to love or fear.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
And it's kind of interesting to think of things in that context too, because you'd think hate would be the opposite of love, but it's not.
No, that's right.
Hate is something that's different. Love and indifference are also opposites of each other.
Yeah, but it's love and fear. I agree with you. It's a love
Yeah.
and fear. Yeah. So hatred's under fear,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah. Well, and basically to quote Star Wars, is like fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to violence.
yeah,
Basically, is the mantra that they go. But I mean, you can also go the other side too, where love leads to compassion, compassion leads to empathy, empathy leads to togetherness and to truly caring about people.
Understanding to others, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and there's a big thing that goes either way, and just because we went from basically the middle of the food chain to the top of the food chain in really a few generations, we haven't learned how to become the apex species.
No.
So we're constantly fighting ourselves, our own insecurities. My phone dings, it's like I get a pang of anxiety in my stomach or something, or get cut off on the road or whatever, and we're dealing all these stresses where if we were like you said before, it's like a dog is a dog. He knows what's up. Certain thing, a cat is a cat. It's like, well, a shark is a shark. I mean, that thing took millions of years to become the apex predator.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to do anything but be a shark.
Yeah.
It wakes up Monday morning, it bites stuff. Like, that's what it does.
Yeah, exactly. And so, in our context, well, it's acceptance, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of accept who you are. It doesn't mean that when I say acceptance, it doesn't mean that, well, you don't strive to be a better person or to do better things, to be more compassionate, to be more loving. It just means that you accept your starting point,
Yeah.
who you are, where you are, and then you can be compassionate and be loving and all these things, and try to control and resist the hate and the anger and all these things. I still get angry.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you have to accept what a terribly flawed human being you are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't
Yeah.
go around saying I'm perfect and the rest of you are all shit.
Yeah. Well, and to be not just honest with yourself, but also when you have interests and goals in life, like make them attainable.
Yeah.
Is the other thing too, and I think we talked about this earlier, is the idea of the journey.
Yeah.
Like, appreciate the journey, not just the goal at the end of that journey, because think of all the steps that it took you to get there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a history professor. You have a family that you love and appreciate. When you're 20 years old, I doubt most of that was in your head of how this is going to turn out, or which direction is going to be okay, or do I even give a shit about history when I'm 20?
No, I was looking for a girl.
Yeah.
Like most guys, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, your mind isn't the same, and one, you're not the same person that you were when you were 20 either. You hope not.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. I had one of Yvelle's girlfriends got mad at me and said, "You've changed." And I said, "Good. We're supposed to change."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, stagnation's kind of a boring place to be.
Yeah, and again, that self-denial or denial of reality that the world's changing around you. We want to live in the present moment, we talked about earlier, but tomorrow's another present moment. And what's that going to bring? Well, we don't know, but it could change everything. You're still going to have to accept it, but if it's a war, then you want to fight that war to stop it.
Yeah.
Right? Or do your part, whatever it is. But you don't want to start from the position of anger today, because then you're just grinding your teeth and causing harm to yourself and loved ones.
Yeah. Yeah, and of all those emotions and stuff that we are typically associated with, because we all have fear and anxiety and anger and whatever, stress and all these things, but joy is kind of it's by itself. Like, we have really one good feeling, and then we have a bunch of other stuff that keeps us scared and of ourselves and of each other, sort of thing. But it's just fighting that programming of being from the middle to the top of the food chain kind of thing, where it's like, oh, okay, well, we're able to have these things. We're okay to, like you say, accept the fact that I don't have to worry about a bear eating me. That's not really part of my life anymore. My primal brain says it's a possibility, though. Or you start to
get the reptilian brain.
you start to get hungry or something like that, and you want to sit and eat as much pasta or whatever because it really loads you up well, and you're storing for something because you don't know when your next meal is. In your reptilian brain, you cognitively know that I can eat anytime, anywhere.
Yeah.
But it's like there's a hard time reconciling both of those things all the time because we're not yet evolved to that point.
Yeah. But you're a young man. I say that because I'm an old man, and you're further along your path than a lot of people I've met. I've taught a lot of people from the ages of 20 to 40 for the last 30 years. You're further along your path than most other people, I would say.
I use big words sometimes. That helps. I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't know. I've had enough shit in my life, I think, is the other thing that I know what an actual problem is, though, I think now. Because, I mean, I tried drinking and smoking my problems away in my 20s. And obviously you can't run from things. Yeah. You know, and it always ends up, if it's not some sort of mental trauma, it's some sort of physical thing that turns, you try to deny something or hide from it, it turns into an autoimmune disease, or it lashes out as some sort of psychological issue or something. You can't suppress things. Like, they're going to come out one way or the other. Yeah. And I figured instead of, continuing down that path, why do I feel angry all the time? Yeah. That's not a normal thing. Yeah. So delve into that. Why is that here? And my hand was kind of forced, but at the same time, at the expense of what everything could have been, I could still be a raging alcoholic. Yeah. Oh yeah. I enjoy having a few drinks now, and I don't crave getting drunk or running from my reality or my issues and stuff like that, because it's way easier to confront things. It's way easier to live in truth, because keeping track of lies is so tedious. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And if you live in truth, then you never have to remember anything. Yeah. Really, when it comes down to it. When I was young, Val and I were just starting dating. I had a job working loading. I had a lot of jobs loading buses, trucks, and airplanes and stuff like that. And the last job was a good union job and good wages and stuff. But I was becoming a raging alcoholic and, like you say, smoking my brains out and stuff. But running away from myself. Yeah. And I almost ruined our relationship. And we would have broken up, and Val would have said, "Fuck this" at a certain point. And the universe intervened and almost killed me. And I went, "Oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I'll just do something else." And when I was working on a forklift, I was about 12 feet up, maybe something like that. Yeah. Slipped off. I was going backwards. And I used my core strength and pulled myself up. But what it did was move my hips out of joint and stuff. So I was in pain for the last 30 years until Jin Shin Jitsu came along and Reiki and stuff. And I could... and I accepted that I was a healer. I was told I was, but we all are. Yeah. Right? We're all our healers. And I finally accepted it, and my back's okay. Now I got to work on my shoulders. Yeah. But that changed my life. I went back to school. And it wasn't long after that, Val and I got married. Yeah. And the rest has been just wonderful every day. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, right into that whole idea of, like, we create our own realities. And you told yourself, I'm injured. Yeah. Yeah. I'm broken, I can't be fixed. That's right. And it sticks in your mind, and then all of a sudden your brain says, that's it. It's not going to get fixed. That's the end of it. Yeah. And our bodies know how to fix themselves if we just focus on them and let them do it. Yeah. And there's so much that we can do with ourselves. And I think that's probably one of the greatest gifts that I've been given is... the consciousness of my own body, because it's there with me all the time. Yeah. And we only get one of these meat sacks. Yeah. So take care of it, for one, but for two, more often than not, your body is what fixes itself anyways. Yeah. You go get some type of surgery because something has to be cut out, or you're given certain types of medication. Like, more often than not, you're the one that still has to do the healing. Yeah. So you talk about surgery, you break your leg or whatever, you go in the hospital, then you rest. Right? Doctor, bed rest. Yeah. Right? Stay off it. Right? Well, then it kind of forces you then just to lie there and let your body heal. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're, and most people do it passively, right? But you're conscious that you can, and now I am as well. So then it speeds the recovery, and it enhances the end product or whatever, the actual heal. Yeah. When you're healed, it's better and stronger. At least I think that. I don't know. Yeah, I've seen it actually in action, not just on other people, but because I've been trained to use my mind to fix my body, which I mean is kind of what happens anyways. You just focus your energy into it and you meditate with helping it move along, because it's already going to do its natural process. But same analogy, like you're in a hospital bed and it's like, well, you need bed rest. Okay, well, are you going to try to focus your mind on thinking consciously about trying to heal that leg, or are you going to watch TV and not think about it at all? Or just get pissed off because it's painful, or this thing's broken, what an asshole.
Yeah, exactly. and all that negative stuff hinders your healing.
Yeah.
It takes longer, and when it's done, it's not as complete as it could have been.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, when we've broken sticks over top of our grandmaster's arms and stuff like that, and you can see like he gets welts and stuff like that, and it takes him no time to just sit and meditate and focus on it, and you go see him 2 days later and there's nothing there, and they're not pre-cut dowels or anything. They're just stuff that you go to the store and you buy and you smash them over his arms. And well, the ones we had actually that we pulled off the rack, and they were actually covered up with hockey tape.
Oh yeah.
And I had to try to swing it because I was one of those bigger people that could actually swing it hard enough to break it over his arm. That didn't feel good because, I mean, hitting somebody in the first place, somebody's like, especially somebody I trust and respect that much, was weird in the first place. But you could also like see when he focuses his mind and he kind of just tenses up, and then he sticks his arms out, and it's like you kind of like feel his energy radiating. It's like, yeah, this takes a lot of focus and energy, and it's took him 40 years or so to get to that point where he understands that. Yeah, my mind is way stronger than my body is even, and I've got a pretty strong body. Yeah. You know, and well, one of the students that was training, and we were doing takedowns and stuff like that, and she fell on both of her arms backwards, and she broke both of her wrists.
Oh, yikes.
And there was a lot of bruising and stuff like that, and Grandmaster said, it's like, this is going to suck and you're going to be out for a while, but just focus on your left arm. Just focus on it and try to heal that one first, and then go to your right side. And the girl came back a couple of days later, and she like took some of her bandages off, or well, I mean, because you can't really cast a wrist kind of for some of it sort of thing, but you could see like the swelling was noticeably different, the color was different, it was almost gone actually on the one side, sort of thing like that. And it was just, well, I guess it was more of a sprain, it wasn't a full-on break for some of it, but either way, I mean, she landed pretty squarely and evenly. It's not that one had more impact or the other, sort of thing. It was just, it's like, yeah, focused on it well, and it healed up really fast. And then a week later, she started focusing on the other one, and then all of a sudden it just and sucked in and fixed itself way faster. And she's like, I've never had this kind of injury go away so quickly. And she's like, I don't get injured very often, but she said, even just having my mind put into that direction where I'm thinking about healing, not this is going to take away from work, this is going to take away from my training, this is like, how is this
all negative thoughts,
just keep that positive sort of thing and going, and a huge help. I mean, even neuroscientists have been called in to help with military training because it's a huge thing that they can help better and more physically capable soldiers also be mentally stronger as well. And little things that we talk to ourselves in our own heads, like 300 to 1,000 words a minute or something crazy like that.
Oh, I know.
It's amazing how much you talk to yourself, but if you can continually change it into positive work, not I'm tired, this is too much work for me, I don't know if I can get to the end, sort of thing, to it's not just me, but it's, you know, like, or I have the energy, like we're almost done, we can get this to the end, like we're going to just dig deep and get the energy that I need to finish this. And yeah, like that positive self-talk goes a long ways, whether you're injured or not. It's just like an everyday practice, which again is, you know, self-doubt and anger and frustration and all these negative things that constantly creep in. It's just think of that joy side. How can I say the exact same thing but in a positive way?
Turn it around. In my 40s, I was depressed and was on anti-anxiety and anti-depression pills, right? Yeah. And what all that did for me was it felt like life was closing in on me. Everything was going wrong, right? And what the drugs did was slow my mind down, because I was talking to myself a mile a minute. It was all negative. And it slowed me down, so I caught the spiral at the top. When I'd say something negative, I'd go, no, it's not negative. Everything's good. And stop the spiral. And so after about 18 months, I could get off the pills and stuff. And ever since then, I can catch myself. It doesn't mean I don't have angry outbursts or anything, but I catch the depressive, the negative talk, the self-talk, and blah, blah, blah. I can catch that. And so I was grateful for that, because I wasn't feeling pretty good at all about those things. One thing I want to raise, so before I forget, is that you might go on YouTube at some point and look, John Cleese from Monty Python. Yeah. John Cleese, University of Virginia, I believe it is. It's one of the campuses. Okay. And what they were doing is looking at children and sort of past life kind of stuff. And this one kid came up, and he was living in a different place, St. Louis or somewhere. And he kept saying to his mom, he'd be about 5 years old, maybe 6 years old. He kept saying to Mom, "We've got to go to Hollywood, Mom. That's where I belong. That's where I'm supposed to be." And Mom, "Oh, yeah, okay, you get there." No, I mean now. So he was pestering Mom, and so she somehow heard about this group. So this one psychologist went out, and they figured out who the guy was, who the child was talking about, right, to try to figure out. And so he brought pictures, and they just juxtaposed two pictures. One would be a public school, one would be the guy's public school, that from a different life, right? Yeah. And he went through all this thing, and the kid picked out the right one all the time. So they figured out that he had been reborn. And so when they talked about it, he said, yeah, most of what we're finding is that about 20 years after someone dies, or 25 years after they die, on average, they can be reborn. And we don't know where they're being reborn, but these children are the clues, because the children are less prone to the self-doubt. Yeah. Just the child will believe it because it's real, because it is real to him. Whereas you and I would go, oh, no, well, I'd like to go to Hollywood, but no. Yeah. I wasn't there before. And they found the guy was a bit actor and that kind of stuff. So he had a Hollywood life. It wasn't the Academy Award-winning life, but the kid really felt strongly about it. Mm-hmm. And there's all sorts of other examples. Anyways, that was one. Another one will come back to me, so but I wanted to raise that before I forget, that you can go on YouTube and listen to them talk about it, because it's quite fascinating. It touches on a lot of things we've talked about today. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and John Cleese is definitely one of those people why he's so funny is because he's also a very intelligent person. Yeah. And he has a really good grasp on the depths of what, the human existence really is. Yeah. I think, and that's why it's so easy to make fun of things when you see like how preposterous we are. Yeah,
yeah, you don't take life so seriously, right? So.
Yeah, but I've seen some of the older sketches that they do when, he talks about political parties and the whole sarcasm about it, sort of thing like that. But it's like, if you want to be angry about something, and then it's like, go to the left or with all the liberals, and you have all this and blah blah blah, and breaks down both sides about how and it's just that's just spot on. And that was made 40 years ago or something like that. Exactly. It's just, that's completely accurate. But you have to know what's going on to be able to make fun of it. Yeah, I think you have
to have that understanding, right? Yeah, understanding. He's just a moderator, so in fact, he hadn't hardly said anything at all in the thing, because it's so fascinating to listen to these. There's about 5 maybe psychologists with different specialties looking at similar things about the psychology of that. Yeah.
So no, past life regression stuff is really interesting, because I think that's a good way of looking at it. I mean, our collections of energy are, it's in our body, but I mean, our body changes out its atoms, like all of them, basically every 7 years. Yeah. So we're physically different creatures, even. Yeah. So
it's fascinating. Eh?
Yeah, and that idea too. Like if you start changing parts of a boat out, because it gets weather worn or rotting out or sort of thing like that. Like, how much of the boat do you change out until it's no longer that same boat?
Yeah. But you have to be conscious of the change, and that's why my comment earlier about yourself, that you'd come to it earlier than I did, and earlier than most of the people I've talked. And yes, please. Thank you. You need some more?
Thank you. Yeah, well, that was kind of the funny comparison. I think it was one of those philosophical things, like if you kept all those pieces that you took out of the original boat and you reconstituted it, and you slowly changed all these parts out, well, you have one boat that was the blue nose, but you also have this decrepit version of the blue nose. But which one's the blue nose?
Yeah.
So and then we're kind of the same thing. It's like I've been Connor since 1981, but I've changed out my atoms at least 5 times at this point.
Yeah.
So am I actually Connor still?
Yeah. Well, it's the interesting thing about the mind and consciousness, because all the experts can't really define. Well, they have definitions, but they can't really explain it because they don't understand. So, and I would say, not being an expert, well, maybe you're missing that spiritual part. That there's something that your training is missing because you're not looking for it, because you reject it, right? You reject it. Well, I haven't seen your spirit, your soul, so therefore it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe our soul is the spark, the actual spark, and then we're just, like you said, we're just the meat.
Yeah.
So you can change the meat, but you're still the same person. And that Many Lives, Many Masters book says, well, if you don't deal with it now, you're going to deal with it again, right? And in your life, it gets more difficult each time you do it. And every life that you don't deal with it, the next life it becomes more difficult to overcome that. Plus, you have other things to overcome, so it gets more complicated. So deal with it now. Don't run. We talked about this earlier. Don't run away from things.
Yeah, it's going to follow you.
Yeah.
And well, now that was always the interesting way of looking at it too. It's like people travel or they have a breakup or this or that, and it's like, well, you're still you though. You can't run away from that. Mm-hmm. You have to look inward to find the answers, not look out in Australia or something like that to find them necessarily, right? So
that's right. In that book, coming back to that book, he talked to the girl and he said, and this is another thing that really appealed to me. He said, "Do you recognize anybody?" And she looks around and she goes, "Yeah, I see my grandfather." "Oh, so what is he dressed like?" Trying to figure out what time period it is. He goes, "Well, he's not my grandfather. No, he's my sister." I go, "What? Well, how can you tell?" "The eyes. And when I met Yvelle, it was her eyes. I was transfixed on her eyes. Because I met her through a friend, right? And it wasn't even an introduction at all. This at that time, just Ron and I came over because you're heading over to see your girlfriend in Europe, who was already there. We were in front of your place, and you two, she was talking to my friend, not to me. I just stood there looking at her eyes, going, "Holy crap! It's just beautiful eyes," and you still do. And when I read that book, I went, "Oh, I recognized Yvelle." That's the first thing. The second thing. People say, it's romantic. Remember the first kiss? No, I remember the hug. She gave me a hug. And I said that to Brenda, who was the healer. She goes, "Oh, felt like home, eh?" I said, "Yeah, I was home." And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, 18 months later, I said, "Let's get married." She laughed at me.
Nice.
I was in school. I didn't have a job, no money or nothing.
Yeah.
I didn't have a car. She had the car. She was laughing. No. I was disappointed, but she was right. But again, just this is, to me, it was confirmation. Reading that book, confirmation that we're going around again. And I recognized Yvelle's eyes, just like this girl recognized her family. Yeah. So what I took from that book is there's a small group of people, maybe a half dozen or so, or maybe more. I don't know. And I keep thinking about half dozen in my case. You go around with over and over and over again. You switch places, try to get it right. So maybe it's my mother and my grandfather, who both whom I was closer to in my life. Maybe it's my brother, and obviously maybe it's Yvelle. But not Yvelle and I don't go around every time, because all the healers have said, you've been together 8 or 9 times. So if we have, like that girl at 80 lives, then every so many lives we get together again, because we need each other to help each other to deal with whatever the obstacle is that we're supposed to deal with down here.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Yeah, well, I think it was Uncle Ken that had talked about that too, and you hear people have out of the blue heart attack when they're 32 years old or something like that, and it's like, well, maybe the idea is that they had a lesson to learn, and they learned it, and they had no reason to be here anymore. So they move on to their next life because of it. And I first heard that when I was 18, 19, and I was like, well, I don't know. And then the more I think about it and more into spirituality I got and understood, the idea, like even on the scientific version of, levels of energy, and there's always that 21 grams or whatever it is that is a difference in body weight when somebody dies, and it's like you guys can quantify some of this, You know, if you want to just have black and white science on it, but even then, it's like if you lean towards philosophy and stuff a little further, and like the more you think about it, it's like, well, philosophy and science start to kind of intermingle after a certain point.
Yeah. Oh yeah, science was called natural philosophy.
Yeah.
To start with, right, back in the olden days, and then it separated. Well, and, I don't know. I used to know that. 1500s, 1600s, Galileo and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Scientific revolutions. But,
Then the church came involved.
oh my God.
Well, the church was always involved, and even a lot of those old scientists were religious people. They had their beliefs, and
Lots of scientists today are good Catholics, but they're physicists
Yeah.
trying to figure out the universe. And to me, at first when I heard that, I went, "Oh, come on!" Then I started thinking, "Oh yeah, you don't have to reject one or the other. You can be a good Christian. It appears to me you could be a good Christian and still be exploring the universe, trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Because all you'd have to, the only thing you'd have to do to reconcile that would be to think, well, I'm sort of doing God's work, right? He created this thing. I'm trying to understand it. That's all.
Yeah.
Right. So you just don't reject your God, but you, like Einstein said, religion without science is blind. Science without religion is lame.
Yeah.
So he understood you had to have both.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was his big thing too. Like, he wanted to know the mind of God,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't necessarily mean that specifically, like thinking God is specifically a creature entity that created everything, but at the same time, there's a lot of questions that we simply don't have answers for.
Yeah, and he was looking at his specialty. He had certain things that he was looking at, relativity and all that. So I interpreted it as he wanted to understand the mind of God, so he understand more of what he's trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Right. So he couldn't reject God because he needed, at least in the background, for him to try to understand. Not in his equations necessarily. He always rejected that. Don't put God in the equation. But in the back of his mind, so that he could fully understand.
Yeah.
And complete his journey.
When he died trying to prove that the universe was a constant, even though Hubble had proven that it's not just our galaxy, but it's like the whole universe is expanding.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, there's got to be some, like, I can't wrap my mind around there being something that isn't a consistent way of doing things. But it's like
we're living this finite planet, though, right?
Yeah.
So the two questions that come to mind are, what was before the Big Bang, and what is it expanding into?
Yeah. Well, that's I mean, yeah.
questions you and I can't answer because we're little puny entities.
that's a good way of looking at it. But I mean, getting back to the whole religious sort of thing, part of it too. Like when they talk about, these scientists, like, oh, Big Bang this, and it was infinitesimally small and hot or whatever, and everything grew from that. It's like, okay, so you have this thing that's beyond belief, quite honestly, that created the entire universe, but there's no such thing as God. Like, he couldn't have snapped his fingers and started that sort of thing. Oh no, that's preposterous.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
can't. No.
so then explain to me what was before the Big Bang. Well, I can't.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, exactly. Well, and even they talk about it too. It's like, well, we're not entirely sure that this is everything, because like our observable universe is maybe part of something that is in fact infinite.
Yeah.
So maybe we just don't have the size to see it, because light degrades after a certain amount of, right around 13.7 billion years, and it just all looks the same after that.
Yeah, the originally there was 6 planets that we could see.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the universe, but it was all in spheres around us, because that was the theory, right?
Yeah.
But then with advances in technology and their own thought process, we expanded it, and then you get the Hubble, and then you get now the James Webb is going out.
Yeah.
As soon as the Hubble went up, they took this picture, and all of a sudden, every one of these is a universe, right?
Yeah.
Not just a galaxy, but a universe. What are you talking about? And there's thousands of them.
Yeah.
Just in that one, and the telescope was only focused on one small section of the sky.
Yeah.
So it's way more complex and bigger than, and they can tell me that it's to the 33rd power or something. That's how big it is. Well, it doesn't mean anything to me. It's way beyond my. They say that we can comprehend 6.
Yeah. Yeah, like you get to 1 million and that's about it.
Yeah. Well, I understand million as a concept,
yeah.
but just 6 physical things,
Yeah.
like 6 beers, and
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah, well, and that's I hear physicists talk about that on documentaries and stuff. It's like, well, how can you wrap your mind around like some of the things that you're doing or calculating? It's like, well, I can't. Nobody can.
Yeah.
That's not. It's our way of trying to put a harness on the universe because we have a name for everything. We have to figure out and quantify everything.
Isn't it the Heisenberg principle?
Yeah.
You change it when you look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Well, kind of.
There's another guy.
No, that is a Heisenberg principle,
yeah.
but that in itself is like people are, well, like Deepak Chopra are like, oh, this is all because of philosophy and the way we sense and feel things. Like, no, it's because the way you need to observe something like an electron moving is that you have to hit it with something that's just as powerful, so that once it reacts, it can send back a single photon of light basically back towards you to tell you what happened.
Yeah, it's the size of a hadron collider in France and Switzerland.
Yeah,
it's so huge, and they do that. They whip things around and explode them or hit each other, so they can see what happens when it blows up. And that's when they talk about this must be the Higgs boson over here.
Yeah,
so they can't see any of this stuff, but they see the result.
Yeah,
of it. I think, is that what you're sort of?
Well, yeah, it's kind of that idea, but well, even like the double slit experiment, right, where you have an interference pattern, so there's clean waves that are behind, sort of thing like that. But if you try to observe those particles going through as a detector, then it's just kind of goes to a random sort of thing. But it's because the way you have to look at it, because particles are so small that the wavelength just to observe them will actually go around them a lot of the time. So you have to hit it with such high energy that it'll actually smash it off its regular path to observe it in the first place.
Yeah.
So now it's traveling somewhere different than what it was. Now you don't have a nice clean interference pattern. So it
always struck me is that the either or thing, and we talked about this earlier too.
Yeah.
It's not either or; it's both at the same time. And that's they're sort of crawling towards it now with their quantum theories.
Yeah.
Right, where it's because Einstein had tried his mental gymnastics to understand that. Right, he said God doesn't play dice with the universe. Right?
Yeah.
So it's light is a wave, but it's a particle that's in the wave, right? There's that kind of stuff. So when I read these experiences, I thought, what you're saying, what you're not accepting, because we're talking about accepting, you're not accepting that it's both.
Yeah.
And that's because when you accept that it's both, that's beyond our last 1,000 years of development, mental development, scientific development, philosophical development, whatever you say. It's beyond our ken, as the Scots would say. We're beyond our knowledge. Yeah. And so they look at it and say, we can do these supercomputers. Well, no. Every time somebody says supercomputer, it hasn't done anything, hasn't made that calculation for you yet. It's just you're jumping the gun on it. Because you can't explain why it's both. Just accept what it's both, and maybe that'll lead your mental faculties to the answer you're looking for. This is how I see it, but I'm not a scientist, so I don't know.
Yeah, listening to some of the scientists talk about that, like Sean Carroll says, like, well, most of what you learn in high school is wrong. Like, just accept that part to begin with. But
that's a good start. Yeah.
Most people don't go past that, so you don't really need to correct them or anything. So no, it's good enough. Yeah. But more often than not, it's how reality works, and to even just explain it to regular people, it's like I still have to make a lot of leaps and bend a lot of things because like I have to make analogies because I can't talk to you in calculus. Like you don't understand calculus, so it doesn't make any sense for me to say something to you.
Then coming back to Einstein, he said if you can't explain it to I've seen different versions of this quote. One is that if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't really understand it. Yeah. And somebody else said, no, he said, but if you can't explain it to your grandmother, you don't really understand it.
Same
but
idea,
either way,
though,
same thing, right? Yeah, you to somebody who is naive about it, doesn't understand any of what you're talking about. If you can't explain it to them, you don't understand it yourself. And I thought that is really good. That is really good. Yeah. And that helped me to change the way I lectured. So I made sure I kept my song and dance. I just tried to make sure that I was explaining it so that they understood it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually one thing that I've been lucky with too, because of being having to teach with other in construction kind of things or in martial arts or whatever, is that you have to find that common ground, that you should be able to relate anything to anybody if you find some common ground where you can make things all make sense. And because I mean, everybody has a pretty even level of experience in life a lot of the times. I mean, not everybody has the same opportunities or exact same situations, but we all react to things pretty similar. I mean, our bodies are only built a certain way. We can only move certain ways. Like, things can only be built a certain way that, you know, physics will allow. Right? So and same thing with history. I mean, you can talk about it like a history book and be dry and dusty as the book is, or you can say it's like, well, the reason why these people did this, it's not just these are the events, the motivations behind these people. So then you start to delve into a little bit of psychology and philosophy of part of it, sort of thing too, which
trying to get a rounded picture, not the flat one. Yeah,
and I'm sure you probably became far better at being a teacher and know what to do to reach your students better after lots of things that you've done wrong.
Yeah, that's the thing we talked about earlier about failure is a better teacher than success.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, success, you don't have, you think you've got it all right, so you don't have to correct anything.
Yeah,
that's not even really true necessarily. So,
analogy I would use is in the NHL, it used to be almost a rule that whoever won the President's Trophy, the top team in the league, lost in the first round of the playoffs. Because all they had was success; they never had adversity, so they didn't know how to deal with adversity when it slapped them in the face. Yeah, and I think it's an imperfect analogy, but it's
pretty accurate, though.
Yeah. A couple of men talking here.
Not that I watch hockey or anything, but I know exactly what you're saying.
There's other sports analogies, but you don't want to bore your belt too much.
Yeah. No, I think that's that whole science philosophy sort of thing where, I mean, kind of the overarching part of the discussion. I mean, that's everything that we do is trying to be built on the previous things that we have. I mean, the fact that we can sit down and have a civil discussion about things where we attribute a lot of the stuff that we consider civil now to the Greeks, and to say it's like, oh, well, this is where it came from. It's like, it was a mess then. They decided, though, it's like, are we going to constantly fight every time, or are we just going to, should we talk about this once in a while? You know, is everybody crazy, so let's throw them into a shack or a cell or a hole in the ground? Or like, well, what's crazy exactly? What are we saying that crazy is? Let's sit down and talk to the guy.
Just had the thought that they were a society with slaves and everything. But we'll go into a discussion of democracy, because these days that's very depressing. I want to bring up something that arose earlier, but I never got around to talking about it. Talking about healing. And stuff. One of the things that I ran across, and it's on YouTube, I can try to send it to you. But basically, this guy was saying you don't have to be trained or anything. Chi is all around us, right? Yeah. Energy, life energy. So you can gather it. It says just start with your palm or your hand chakras. Just warm them up a bit, stuff to get them going, and then just gather chi around. Again, intention is really important. You do it consciously. And you create a little ball of energy. And the guy said, well, do it for 5-10 minutes, and then if your liver's the problem, you just hold the energy to your liver for as long as you can, and it'll heal. I do things quickly. One of my problems. And so I just do it for a short period of time, but I do it for all my chakras and stuff, and it's helped. It just
that's why you need the patience of a stone, like you talked about.
Exactly. Well, I started doing it more consciously again more recently, just because I have a COVID brain fog from COVID. Yeah. So I want to get rid of that, and plus there's other issues I've sort of narrowed down to this. Chakra will help, and for this thing and that kind of stuff. But basically, really, what's worried me is my cognitive skills, because there was an abrupt change from where I was at. And I was expecting, Val and I are smart, and we know how old people decline and stuff like that. And we didn't want to decline. All of a sudden, I declined. And I don't like this. So I've been using the energy of chi to try to restore my memory and my cognitive skills. And it's worked. Val mentioned to me one day, she says, oh, you're sounding better. right? But even in this conversation today, I'm searching. I'm not finishing my thoughts like I used to.
Yeah.
In terms of, I used to be able to go, okay, there's three things I'm going to say, A, B, and C, and under A, B, and C, there's three things. And I could go through the whole thing in about 2 minutes in a response to you. Now I'm struggling to do it. But I found healing, because I finally accepted that I am a healer, like you are, that I can do it. And I'm using, just gathering chi from around me.
Yeah.
And anybody can do it.
Yeah. Well, I got to say you're doing well, because you're bringing back a lot of the points, and you're keeping the conversation fairly circular. Because there's things that I've been thinking. It's like, well, should we delve into this part more deeply or whatever? So it's not like it's not there. Like, you're definitely keeping a lot in your mind, more than you probably realize.
Oh, okay, good.
But
thanks.
Yeah,
I needed that.
Yeah. But I mean, that's kind of the whole idea. Well, with learning Tai Chi and stuff, like they say that you can learn it when you're 20. You'll do it better when you're 40, but you'll understand it when you're 80.
Yeah, there you go.
And it makes a lot of sense, because I started doing some of the Tai Chi stuff, because it's a little bit off the direct path of what it is that I've been learning. Mm-hmm. But I mean, well, as I understand it, Kung Fu is kind of like the mother of all martial arts, and all of them kind of are just small focuses on each of those.
Oh, interesting.
The idea being something like, and I might get in trouble for this, but what I understand, at least anyways, is Kung Fu was the original one, and something like karate was taken by the Japanese, and they focused on just the hard style side of it. And then Tai Chi was taken to be just focused on the soft side of it. And then, Jiu-Jitsu and Judo and stuff like that was focused on just the grappling part of it. Aikido or Hapkido sort of thing was taken to focus on joint manipulation and really focused on redirecting energy and stuff like that. But I mean, each of their own things are for their own purposes. But I mean, that whole idea of understanding that idea of focusing in energy and really bringing that full force sort of thing like that, and having that idea too, where, well, I guess probably the best way to say it is, as my grandmaster said it, it's like you can go for 2 weeks without food, you can go for maybe 2 days without water, but you can try to not breathe for 2 minutes.
Yeah,
it's impossible. Yeah. Right? And we're walking through this sea of energy constantly, like the point that you had made. Yeah. Is that it's exactly that. Like we take our breath for granted, because we're, I mean, similar to a lobster in the sense that, we're at the bottom of an ocean of oxygen, and we just take all this for granted. We don't even understand what it is that we actually have even. Mm-hmm. Every breath we have is a breath of life. Yeah, yeah. And it's everything. So to just try to calm your mind down and focus on your breath, and let that heal your body. Yeah. Huge part of what can help and heal. And I mean, your mind, like the idea of consciousness too, is that your mind can think about itself thinking. To try to go like inside of itself kind of thing, to say it's like, okay, I need to heal my mind, my brain physically, but my cognitive function as well. Mm-hmm. So you meditate on meditating and thinking. Yeah. And you think about thinking then. It becomes very circular, and it's like, okay, this is maybe where I do need psychedelics again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think all the politicians should be forced to do a hit of acid when they're elected. Yeah. And it changed the way they see the world, and they'll stop being such assholes. But
yeah. Yeah, be a part of the entire country all at once. You can do it when you're high.
I know that was a naive comment, but nonetheless, they should. I'd like to see Mitch McConnell on it too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and a lot of these policymakers that make these rules about things that they clearly have no idea about.
Yeah. Oh, it's you see a lot of the memes on Reddit these days about the Republicans saying, for example, no masks, I'm an anti-masker, it's my life, my body, my life. And they're the same person who's telling a woman what to do with her life and her body. What capital H hypocrisy. But again, I didn't want to get into the politics of it, because it is really
it gets deep, but I mean, there's
another.
I mean, like you say, with the memes and stuff like that, if somebody that had don't drink the water, there's fluoride in it, as a bumper sticker sort of thing like that, while their hand is hanging out the driver's side window with a cigarette.
Yeah. I'm not going to put that in my body because I don't know what's in it.
Yeah, don't drink the water. Jeez.
But they're not. I don't want to use the word woke because it's all been politicized. Everything's
Yeah.
been politicized.
Well, and it's been run through the mud because who can be woke enough now? Like, you guys are like completely defeated the purpose of the word now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of it. I mean, we started talking about political correctness, which sort of leads us to this cancel culture and stuff.
Yeah.
The political correctness was the tool of the right wing, I think, to stifle any kind of discussion. And then the left, the Democrats in the States, it's identity politics. So then they come together. So you can't tell jokes anymore because you'll offend somebody.
Yeah.
Well, all my best Ukrainian jokes came from Ukrainian people. I tell you that.
Yeah.
Right now. But and the cancel culture, it's the people who are speaking loudest about or denouncing more loudly that you're trying to cancel me. They're the ones who are trying to cancel.
Yeah.
Right? It's that hypocrisy. They're trying to cancel people who are transgender, who are gay, who are women in their reproductive rights or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? The indigenous people, whatever. But they complain about being canceled because, we're calling out their racism, essentially. Well, you can't cancel me. That's our tradition, to be a racist. No, fuck you,
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's such contradictory thinking because, they're the same people that talk about cultural appropriation. It's like, so are you saying that we should keep things segregated, like segregate the races?
Yeah.
Well, that's not what I said. It kind of sounds like you did. Or I want to be like a unique individual, but I want to be the same and treated equally like everybody else.
Yeah.
It's like, well, again, like, which are you? I mean, I understand being human, you can hold contradictory ideas, but some of these ones are like diametrically opposed.
Oh yeah, I think the phrase is cognitive dissonance. You hold these two opposite ideas equally in your mind.
Yeah.
And that's the definition of a Trump supporter. But that's my prejudice. I was just remembering anthropologist Margaret Mead who said, "You're unique, just like everybody else."
Yeah. Yep. Nail on the head. Oh man. Yeah. Stop generalizing.
So in the end, we have to live our lives, and people are living. We're forced into living a shallow life in the sense that you got to earn money to have a house and a car and raise a family or whatever it is that you want to do. We're sort of forced into that, but that becomes the be all and end all. And everything we've been talking about this afternoon is, I think, is what is believed, felt, discussed, or lived by people like us. That are we a minority? I don't know. I hate to think that we're.
No, but I mean, being a white man living in Canada, I mean, I understand that my life is pretty easy, so I don't think I really have a need to bitch about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But at the same token, though, too, I mean, I am a man. I've lived almost 40 years now, as where a lot of these people that are pissing and moaning about things are, somewhere between 18 and 25, like most of them, and they don't know what it's like to be responsible for shit yet. Like I mean, your prefrontal cortex doesn't finally finish developing by the time you're 25, I think it is, right?
Really?
So, so I mean, that's why they suggest if you're going to smoke grass, like wait till you're 25. So I mean, there's kind of two ways of looking at it, because I mean, it's not as doesn't have its plasticity anymore, and it starts hardwiring and specialing into things that you do know. That's why they try to push post-secondary to get it done before you're 25, because it's easier to learn then.
Okay.
But I mean, to say that a 25-year-old has their shit together. I mean, I used to think when I was in my 20s, like, oh yeah, I think I got it going on. I look at my 25-year-old self now, like, what a jackass.
I've had that conversation myself too.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's just it. Or I'll turn 40 this year, and it's like, man, I don't feel that old. I feel like, I kind of feel like I'm 20 sometimes. Then you talk to 20-year-olds, like, yeah, I'm 40. That's totally fine.
Well, Val and I are stuck at 25
in
our hearts and in our minds.
Yeah, our
body doesn't believe us, but
Yeah, again, it's the mantra, right?
Yeah.
Make the body's reality from the mind. So
I guess we haven't been talking to the body enough to tell us that we're 25.
Yeah.
But it's just it's the attitude to life. And then on top of the 25, then, but you have 25 with 40 years experience, and all the stuff that we were talking about before about, just development. And my question, I guess, was just recently was, have we moved forward? I mean, we are, I think, in this room, but how much of society is moving forward? It seems like we're going backwards, and I'm frightened about it.
Yeah.
I'm frightened about it because it's...
Well, and for certain things, we certainly are. I mean, the whole idea... Well, now that it's law, that you can't use... Like, it's illegal to use certain pronouns that somebody didn't agree with. Or you can't talk shit about COVID-19. Or you can't even ask questions about it, even. It's Bill C-10, I think, is the pronoun one, and Bill C-36 is the don't shit talk COVID one. It's actually law now that you can't... Like, it's compelled speech. They're forcing us to not say certain things.
And then that is in regards to everything being fluid and non-binary? Is that...
The pronouns ones especially, yeah, that's more so because of the whole transgender thing, which, I mean, I've talked to a few people even on podcasts, and more often than not, it's just like, I don't know, it doesn't really affect me, so I don't really care. And that's usually the depth of it a lot of the time. Is where somebody like Jordan Peterson's been run through the mud, I don't know how many times, and he still keeps
out himself, the guy.
He does, but I mean, at the same token, though, too, he's still around. He's still relevant because not only is he, he's good at his job. He's a clinical psychologist, but they're waiting for a gotcha moment, and he's smarter than that.
On the platter. No, he strays into areas that he's not trained in.
Yeah.
In other words, he starts talking about history, and he talked other things, and we're going, you don't know shit about that. So I don't care how many books you read about Adolf Hitler or whatever. You don't know history because you've studied psychology. So I'm not going to pronounce on psychology because I haven't studied it. And so I find him very annoying that way because he likes to bring in all this. He likes to show off all his knowledge.
Yeah.
But apart from the psychology, it's all very thin, I think. But
yeah,
I shouldn't bitch.
Well, you're not wrong, though. I mean, he's first to admit when he has a bad way of looking at things or whatever. I mean, he was on Jim Jeffries' TV show, and Jim Jeffries is an Australian comedian, and he did kind of like a Daily Show, whatever, satirical news anchor, really loosely kind of thing like that, but sat down with Jordan Peterson talking about compelled speech and stuff like that. And it's like, well, I don't agree with it and whatever sort of thing. And it kind of got around to the point where Jim Jeffries is saying it's like, well, we're not allowed to use the N-word or whatever, or it's not law that we can't use it, but it's like we don't say certain words against homosexuals and stuff like that either. No, it's not written into law, but it's like it's common courtesy that maybe we shouldn't talk like that anymore.
Oh yeah, these are social niceties, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I just want to return just for a second. You talked about the different bills. Remember that a bill is not a law.
A bill has to be pushed through Senate to be passed to become a law.
Yeah. So and then it comes back to Parliament. But once it's a law, then it ceases to be a bill. So if you're talking about a bill, then it's a proposal. And my question would be, what does it apply to? Does it apply to me, or does it apply to the federal bureaucracy that says, okay, we're going to ask you as the bureaucrats to be conscious of your word choice?
Yeah.
In certain areas, I don't know. So this first I've heard of it.
So when you're born, your gender is left blank.
Yeah, they're not doing gender assignment for just about anybody these days. That they're letting people grow up and choose their own.
Oh, if it's the one I'm thinking of, what that law was about was they're going to change the law on the passports so that it wasn't just are you male or female, but are you
the whole
something else.
Well,
so that's different than legislating you and I.
Yeah, well, and there was something about the whole pronoun thing, and it's. I mean, last I heard it was up to 72, but I mean, are we going to have 72 letters or something, or descriptions that go on a passport or something like that, or are we just going to go male, female, other? Because other kind of is the transgender thing, and I mean, and not to discredit them, like most people, we all see them as people. They're still humans, but at the same time, the vast majority of the world's population is either male or female.
Yeah.
And when there was the argument, a lot of stuff that, well, a lot of universities and stuff that are being, people are walking out of the biology classes, and it's like, well, that's not how it is. It's like, well, this is how the species procreates, not just ours. Males and females have to do a certain thing to make them procreate. Again, we're not saying that some things that are, and the medical term is hermaphrodite, which has become something you're not supposed to say anymore either, apparently.
Oh, really?
Even though it's a medical term.
Yeah.
But it's derisive, I guess, or, trans versus tranny. Like one's acceptable, one's not, sort of thing, right? So it's weird because it's one of those things where the new line of what's acceptable is moved again, and okay, sure, we'll catch up, but give us a bit of a grace period because we don't know all the terms. Or if you meet somebody, you can talk to them without specifying gender at all. That's not a necessity.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you're talking. Is that I don't really care. What are you going to put in the password? It doesn't really matter. I'm looking at you. Does your face match the picture?
To those that
yeah.
fall into that category, it's very important for them.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same token, though, too, if your sexual orientation or gender or sex or whatever is all you got going for you, you're probably pretty fucking boring too. So, like, get a personality while you're at it.
One of the things I learned when I was teaching from my colleagues who are Métis was that they like to use the word half-breed a lot.
Yeah.
And that was the term used legally and constitutionally for a long time.
Yep.
Half-breed land commissions and this kind of stuff. But it became a pejorative because it's usually preceded by fucking or that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Be fucking half-breed. So they use it as a sardonic way to describe themselves or other people in their nation that kind of screw up, do silly stuff. But I can't. I know they never said I can't, but I know I just won't.
Yeah.
Because that's not me. I'll say Métis, I'll say mixed ancestry. I'll say all sorts of things. But I won't say half-breed unless it's in a context that I can justify, which is historical. And so again, that's that outside naming kind of thing. That it's important to them to have that identifier that's their own.
Yeah.
And even in this case, I'm talking about sort of what they use as maybe a slang today, the half-breed, but it's theirs.
Yeah.
It's like you see the black people in the States for decades now have been using the N-word, talk amongst themselves. And I'm more with Dick Gregory and other people like that, African American people who say, no, don't use that word. That was used by our oppressors. And there's no justification for you using it. But they do. Everyone does it in that group. Yeah. But if you and I did it, well, we're automatically racist.
Which is the irony of the whole thing. It's like, I can't say a word because of the color of my skin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that the very definition of racist? But don't get me wrong, I think more so to that point is that no one should say it. If you want to get rid of its power, then just stop using it.
Yeah, and
then it'll fall into history where nobody remembers it anymore. Yeah. So easier said than done, obviously. But
it is. But whoever started saying just use the N-word rather than use the word, that's a good way to sort of end its use eventually. It takes a long time. Change like that takes a really long time because it's a generational thing. Like Val and I were talking about before how her dad or I have an uncle, they would use different terms that and we'd always say, don't say that.
Yeah, that's not cool anymore.
That's their generation. Our generation is better, and we're hopeful that the younger generation is even better than us. Well, like that's generational. That takes a long time to change.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and like you're saying with the whole half-breed thing, I mean, the idea that the word, queer, originally defined was something that's odd or peculiar or whatever. But then people started referring to homosexuals as queer, and same thing with the derogatory terms, so with fucking queer or something like that. And then now it's actually coming back around. It's like we're taking the power back when we call ourselves queer, like gender queer or whatever sort of thing like that, so that we'll say it because we mean something to ourselves what it means. It's not a negative thing anymore.
Yeah, because it's a positive thing. I mean, Métis itself was a derogatory to begin with. Right? There was the French saying, Métis, you're mixed. Yeah. You're fucking mixed. Shut up, But the Métis, Ron Lowbury talked about this to our students one time. And he said, no, we after a while we got tired of it, so we accepted it. And said, yeah, I'm proud Métis. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And at that point, then the people who were throwing it at them stopped using it.
Yeah.
And they know themselves as Michif, though.
Yeah.
That was the term that used in the group, not Métis, but Michif. And again, outside terms.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I believe, with queer. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody about that, but I think it's sort of the same thing.
Yeah.
It was used against them, and they said, no, I'm proud to be queer.
Yeah.
And so that's a positive. So that's how you change things, I guess. But
Yeah.
we who are not queer have to accept it.
Yeah. And which is fine. I mean, again, it's like, well, your name is Chris. Well, that can kind of go any direction, so I'll just refer to you as Chris because that's your name. You know, like, sure, when you're talking about the person in the third person, like the whole they them thing kind of jumps in. It's like, but that's a plural, right? And we're talking about a singular person.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, maybe I'm just getting into semantics at that point. So, like, again, does it actually affect me? No, it doesn't. So just call them something simple so that they know that I'm talking about them, or the group of people that I'm talking
We've
to
had to
know
deal
who I'm
with
talking
it ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I've always found that peculiar, but I thought about it afterwards. Well, there's no until somebody who's non-binary figures out this is what it should be, then they're going to go with they them.
Yeah.
I guess because the language hasn't evolved. They evolved ahead of the language.
Yeah.
It seems. So it's got to come from them, I think, sometime in the future.
Yeah. Well, and the whole idea of binary thought of kind of anything, like other than computer programming, everything in our life lives on some level of a spectrum. Everything. Like, there's nothing that you can think of, I guarantee, that somebody doesn't think slightly different about. And I've tried to think of a topic where everybody would be unanimous about. There's nothing.
No,
It's just not possible. And I think that when all of us stop looking at a non-binary or non-black and white or right or wrong kind of thing like that, like it's all a matter of perspective. Like right and wrong especially, that's very much a matter of perspective a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, people that don't think that, it's like, oh yeah, every cop or politician has never been corrupt or never does the wrong thing. They're people. We all make mistakes. Doctors are there to heal people, and they kill them sometimes. I mean, how many times do you hear about instruments being left inside of a surgery patient? Way more than you'd expect.
Definitely.
So, I mean, to err is human, right? We're allowed to have differences and make mistakes and have a shitty day. Like, these things happen. I mean, yeah, like that whole sliding scale when it comes to gender sort of thing, it's like, well, I'm 6'3", 240 pounds, and I'm bisexual, but does that mean I'm more or less male than somebody that's 5'3" and very much heterosexual? So it's like, well, what does that mean to anybody then? It's like,
I wonder sometimes though when you're thinking about that, you're in a race, and you're in the race to win.
yeah,
And before there was just male and females running towards the finish line.
yeah,
And now you have this whole group of different genders, and the race has just got really complicated. Get out of my way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know. It's really hard at our age to wrap our heads around,
yeah,
being politically correct.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
What's it going to be like for your grandfather?
Well, that'll be, I mean, that's kind of its own thing, I guess, because, well, I mean, God doesn't like certain races and certain sexual preferences and stuff like that, but I mean, it's like, this isn't a conversation to be had then. It's like, you don't want to even try to see something, no problem. But same thing, all these 18 to 25-year-olds that are all the squeaky wheels sort of thing like that, and they're getting the grease, like the media attention, whatever sort of thing like that. Same thing, when they're in their 40s or 50s, they're not going to be woke enough, right? Because their kids are going to be even more progressive, because that's kind of the nature of things. I mean, same thing, Jim Jeffries made a joke about that. It's like, but, I mean, this current generation or newest generation is the most progressive generation in history. But you got to realize every new generation was the most progressive generation in history. You're not fucking special.
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
That's true.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, it'll get to that point where your ideas of this, that, and the other thing, it's like, well, I'm going to marry a sex robot because that's legal now, and sex robots are very human-like. Oh, not in my lifetime. Like, come on, Dad, like get with the times. Like,
We were just talking about that the other day as to whether we are going to be accepting of the, I'm not even going to name it correctly, the Bitcoins.
Bitcoin, yeah.
Yeah.
Bitcoins.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I don't get it. I don't understand it.
Well, I mean, like people always make fun of the reason why any money has value is because we say it does.
Yeah.
And this is just a new version of that.
I know.
So the more people accept it and agree that it has value and it can be used for more and more things, and then businesses start accepting it as actual regular currency, then it becomes a real entity or something like that. Because, I mean, most things are a construct of the human mind, right? Because you can... Well, they talk about that in Sapiens by Yuval Harari.
I read that too.
Really good book.
Mm-hmm.
And they say it's like, well, let's say like something, whatever, Chevrolet is a company. But what is a company exactly? Is it the vehicles? Is it the buildings that they own? Is it the property? Is it the people? It's like, well, you can fire everybody and Chevrolet is still a company. You can burn all the buildings and sell the cars. It's like Chevrolet is still a company. Sure, they don't have assets or employees or something, but it's still technically a company. So, like, what are we giving credence to at that point then? So that there's a lot of, I don't know, that's where the nuances of conversation need to happen, I guess, is part of it too, right? So,
well, for the last little while, we've been talking about something that's so current that we don't have really a context for it, for us to understand it, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's non-binary and all that stuff, it's all brand new to us. Now, it goes back, I suppose, longer than we're aware of at our age, but that is what makes this conversation less illuminating than what we've been talking about before.
Yeah.
Because before we had some kind of grasp on what the context of any particular part of that conversation was. Whereas this, we're struggling. I can listen to all three of us. Bella's been pretty bang on, but we're struggling to make sense of it.
Well, the best I can approximate for something like Bitcoin is the whole idea of a blockchain technology where it doesn't centralize things. Like, say something like a bank that has currency that we understand is a singular institution, so that all of us go to a bank. But it's like, if somebody wants to break into that bank, they can steal all of our money, and what do we do about it? You know, and it's not even a physical break-in anymore. It can be a digital break-in. As where something like Bitcoin that's decentralized, you can hack into somebody's computer, but it's not going to crash Bitcoin. So it makes it a lot safer by taking the control from one group or one entity or one program or whatever and putting it out everywhere. So everybody's a part of Bitcoin now.
Okay.
So if you own some piece of it, whatever, you own part of the company basically. So, and I guess the other way to equate it is kind of like how the stock market works in a sense, where the value of a company is given because people invest money into it. It's not because it's intrinsically valuable.
Yeah.
Right? But same thing is that it can lose its value because somebody starts just selling a bunch of it off. Its price starts to either drop or rise or thing like that, so people start buying and selling whichever way to follow that trend. Doesn't mean the company's any more valuable or not.
No.
And GameStop is a good example of that. 6 months ago or something like that. It's just a video game trader, and stock was trading for like $13, and it went up to 300 and something overnight because a bunch of people just sunk money into it, and it's just kind of like, screw you, Wall Street, we can do this too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
sort of thing. And same idea where it's a singular business that they're doing, but it's kind of in a decentralized thing that the stock market is. But I mean, you always see good memes about that sort of stuff, like a cartoon character talking about it. It's like the rich are mad because the poor's did a capitalism. Yeah.
Well, it just seems because it's I mean, when you talk about money, the intrinsic value of money, or the value of money being what we believe it to be, with Bitcoin, it's an invisible
Yeah.
value, or an invisible coin. Whereas I have a $5 bill in my pocket. I can go to the store and buy whatever.
Yeah.
And everybody understands that that's the way the world is today. Bitcoin comes along, and it's way beyond what the standard is, right?
Yeah.
It's invisible. It's works on a different, works in a different way, at a different level.
Kind of. The way that, because it's old thinking versus the new thinking, is where money is a bottom up. It's a physical structure instead of a bartering system, whatever sort of thing like that. It's a physical tradable thing all the time. So we're going bottom up from a physical use that's become digital, because honestly, do you have $5 in your pocket, or do you spend money on a credit card or a debit card more often than not? Right. So Bitcoin's the other side, coming top down sort of thing like that, saying we'd never had a physical presence sort of thing like that, but we can still be a currency just digitally. So they're kind of going both ways, but meeting in the middle sort of thing, because regular money is basically all digital. So it's, I don't know if that helps, the way of looking at it. But
it does help, yeah, it does help. But for an old codger like me, you look at it and go, I'm suspicious of this.
Yeah.
Because the technology, I wrote a paper when I was an undergraduate on propaganda, and it was well received by the prof. And I've always thought that, I should say, been aware of manipulation, right, since then.
Yeah.
And we're now in the age of digital manipulation, right? And we see it all the time. Trump was a master at it because he's just a hate-filled, scummy little man, right?
Yeah.
And so he used Twitter to rile up all the other people who are just like him.
Yeah.
And so now I see the technology as being useful, right? I have my Visa card and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, the way you described it is we've come bottom up with currency to this level now. Bitcoin's come from top down. I see it as part of this technology, and being an old fart, you go, oh, Jesus, here we got another thing coming along here that looks like a scam.
Yeah.
I understand. I have a friend who has lots of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And has been in it from the start. He was with that one you were talking about with they manipulated.
GameStop.
Yeah. He was part of that to try to thumb the nose at the man, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. But and you've explained.
Money to thumb the nose.
He had the money. Definitely had the money. He's got lots of money.
Yeah.
He's very successful, and but he had the attitude of thumbing it towards people rather than just getting more money.
Yeah.
So I give him that much credit. But between him and you are the only two people who tried to explain it to me in a positive way, right? Because most people our age are the same reaction is, get off my fucking line, you goddamn hippie.
Yeah.
And you see Bitcoin in that sense, right? And so I see it as something that appears to me to be easily manipulable because it's volatile, right? It's going up and down.
Well, it's because it's new, though, is part of the reason. Because, I mean, same thing. Let's say you do have that $5 in your pocket. Mm-hmm. Why is that piece of paper worth $5?
Well, because we believe it, right?
Not only that, why did that piece of paper get you more items in the 80s than it does now?
Yeah.
Right? Because inflation's part of that sort of thing like that. So to say it's not going to do the same thing is...
Are you saying Bitcoin's inflation-proof?
No, not at all. It's day-to-day. Like, well, I have it on my phone. I have some, and it's one of those things that you look at it every 20 minutes if you want, because it changes every 20 minutes or faster even. So it's constantly fluctuating, but because it's new, it has more opportunity to fluctuate, is where money in the stock market is so, well, they grew together sort of thing, so that the more that you add to the stock market is because you're bringing in more physical things into the stock market that have to be traded by currency, because the barter system doesn't work. I'm not going to give you a handful of bananas because I need my shoes fixed or something.
Well, I understand that.
So,
how do I put it? I understand that the currency that exists now worldwide is manipulable, and it happens all the time. George Soros made his fortune betting against the English pound back in 1990 or whenever it was, right?
Yeah.
And so I understand that. But what we see as the ordinary person is not the volatility where people are buying and selling huge units of the Canadian dollar.
Yeah.
Well, what we see and what we're focused on usually is, well, can I drive to the States now? Or is it going to cost me 30% on my dollar to go for a holiday there? That kind of stuff. So you see more or less a fixed thing. Even if it changes from day to day, and even if it drops, it gets to the news and it drops like a cent.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin, I know it's new and stuff, Bitcoin just is maybe open. Brett said that it's more open than the other currencies, where the other currencies manipulated. But just you look at it and you go, it just seems less stable.
Yeah, and it is, for sure it is. But the other way to look at it, though, too, is that, because money has people spending it every day. Pretty much 7 billion people are spending what is money, the dollar, the yen, the whatever sort of thing like that. So everybody that has something to do with the dollar can do very little, even if large groups of people try to do something. The dollar, the yen, whatever, it can't really go up and down that much because you need like an entire country worth of people or something to affect any sort of thing.
And countries do that.
And they do that. They'll tank their own dollar for whatever other purposes sometimes.
Yeah, for
but
trade and whatever.
The difference is that there's only, let's say, 10 million people that own parts of Bitcoin now. So when 10,000 people want to go in a certain direction or they want to sell a bunch just to watch the stock market go up and down with Bitcoin, it makes a big difference. 10,000 people doing something to the dollar, you're not even going to notice it. So the more that people get into it, where people don't necessarily want to follow those trends, so then 10 million turns into 100 million, turns into 5 billion people that have Bitcoin. Well, now 50% of people want to do something, 50% don't. It's going to even itself out regardless of what happens almost at that point.
Okay, here's my question.
So,
is this something that is just a unique aberration?
no.
Or is this going to replace, or are you suggesting it's going to replace the currencies that we have today?
No, and there's dozens or hundreds of different types of cryptocurrency.
Oh, okay.
Bitcoin's just the famous one.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's the other thing. But I mean, they themselves have their own histories and trends and their own version of the stock market that's going sort of thing through. But digital currency is the new thing that people are doing. But Bitcoin's the only one that anybody ever hears about. And I think for practicality's sake, I don't see money disappearing necessarily because you need to use money to buy cryptocurrency. So I think it'll be a similar but different version of it, where the idea of the safety of it eventually will become more apparent to everybody because it's not centralized to just the TD bank or just this bank, so that if they get hacked, you lose a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
Sort of thing like that.
I'm not worried about the hacking the banks. I'm aware of that argument.
What if it's Russia? That's fine.
Well, exactly. Like anything subject to influence. I mean, hackers have hacked into things like Sony and governments and stuff like that too, because they can.
Well, the ransomware guys just got caught and their Bitcoin was stolen back from them.
Yeah.
So, but if how portable is it? In other words, if in the future more and more people are using it, I want to be able to go to my corner store here, right down the block, and I want to buy rent a movie, or I want to buy a prescription or a magazine or something. I can do that now with either my virtual money, which is the $5 bill, or I can take my one of my two cards, a debit or a credit card, and it's accepted. So how does Bitcoin then move into that realm?
It actually has. Brazil, I think, is the first country to adopt Bitcoin as actual currency. That you have basically a debit card with your crypto money sort of thing, that you can use it just like regular dollars now.
Okay.
So
but that would be, I'm guessing that would be still within Brazil, still be limited to those places that want to go along with it.
Yeah, so it's not all the businesses, but it is considered legal tender now.
Oh, okay.
But with that also said, to own one Bitcoin costs $49,000. So I have a couple hundred in there, so I own a 0.0 something % of a Bitcoin.
You gotta change my Bitcoin?
Yeah. Right, so and that's the other part too, I think. Well, just no different than how the dollar, the yen, I don't know if there's rubles still anymore, but the EU's currency, they're not all on the same playing field anyways. So to say that you have $1 or 1 yen or 1 peso, it's like, well, they don't translate directly across because they're not the same thing. They come from different economies, so you need...
There's a it used to be set, but now there's a fluctuating relationship though. So my dollar today is worth X amount of American dollars, X amount of yen, X amount of rubles.
Yeah.
Right? And it might change tomorrow a little bit, but it's not going to change a lot.
Yeah.
So there is that exchangeability. And so I look at Bitcoin, and to me it seems exotic.
And it is.
Right? So it's
is.
an investment rather than a means of exchange.
Yeah. One, it's still basically in its infancy. Same idea, like, well, same reason I didn't buy a smartphone until they got into like the 4th generation, because people are like, oh, these things are so awesome, but they crash a lot and they do this, and then some of them started on fire. Right? So it's like, I'll wait till a couple of generations and then I'll see it. Same thing, it's like I'm kind of dipping my toes into Bitcoin right now, but I'm keeping it a small investment so that if I do lose my shirt or lose the investment, I don't lose a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, with a small amount of money, people become billionaires out of it, sort of thing too. So
yeah, that's why I look at it. See, it is this speculative adventure rather than something that's going to replace what I'm doing myself on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, again, it's basically the new generation, the kids saying it's like, well, we can do that too.
There we go. I know. And we're on the way out.
Yeah.
You're halfway there.
Yeah.
Halfway out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and honestly, from my limited knowledge of what cryptocurrency is, I did a surprisingly decent job of trying to quantify it. So I guess I kind of understand it somewhat.
Yeah,
but
good.
yeah, it's still, I mean, like anything that's new with it, it's going to have its trials and tribulations to make it, see if it is viable. And maybe it'll just crash because real money is still real to a lot of people. And it's going to be hard to break that way of thinking.
Well, if there's a war, then everyone's going to flee everything to get into the gold, like physical gold. Yeah, I think. But
or food stocks or water is the other, possibly new battle that there might be.
Oh, definitely. I told that to Zach years ago. Forget about oil. We need water. We don't need oil. We need water to survive.
Yep, water is life, just like the air. Yeah. But I have to use the bathroom, so I'm going to shut her down for the day.
Okay, I'm going to get a couple of books for you. I'll show you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate it.